Good afternoon, patrons, and welcome to the September 2018 Patroncast, which will also pick up a special little unique subtitle. This is the Jetlagged Patroncast. I'm still really tired. In case I didn't know if I mentioned the actual days, I can't remember if I actually mentioned the days. So, last Saturday, I flew out to, well actually didn't fly out to West Virginia. I'll talk you through the trip. Basically, I flew out last Saturday and I got back on Wednesday morning. And by the time I left America, I was just about, getting close to being on America time, and my body was saying, okay, fine, I'll accept this America thing, just in time for me to come back and have to try and deal with being on British time and trying to stay awake all of Wednesday, and then sleeping 13 hours and thinking I was fine, but then the following night being a nightmare where I could barely sleep at all, and now I'm very, very tired. So this is going to be the tired Patroncast, the jet-lag Patroncast. So if I don't make a huge amount of sense, that's why. Then that's just because, from my point of view, the purple bubble elephants have just come into the room again, and that's why I'm suddenly screaming. That explains everything. Still, let me talk to you about this. And by the way, sorry, okay, I have to caveat this. If anybody has asked any questions this month about, details about Fallout 76, I cannot tell you, okay? I'm sorry. I can start telling you stuff on Monday. For the moment, I can't tell you a thing. So, I'm very sorry if you've asked a question about Fallout 76 that pertains to something that wasn't already in the public domain, before I went on this trip, that doesn't, refer to, one of the trailers that was, at E3 or whatever. I cannot answer. So I'm very, very sorry, but I simply cannot answer those questions. It's not worth it for me under any circumstances to break a Bethesda embargo, because if I do, it's not so much what they'll do to me, it's what they won't do to me, which is the next time they do an event, I'll just be blacklisted and they will never invite me to anything again. That is not worth it. So I'm so sorry, I cannot answer a single question. So if there are any such questions and I don't, acknowledge them, that's why. It's because, I legally cannot. I have signed legal documents saying I will not discuss anything till this next Monday. I think this is supposed to go up on Sunday. So tomorrow, you get information really soon. Really soon, ask me whatever the hell. I'll tell you absolutely everything. Just not quite yet. So. Here's how all of this went. And by the way, I'm going to start all this off by saying, not a good flyer. Alright, I am not a comfortable flyer in the slightest. And it's because I'm a bit on the claustrophobic side. So, and that's not about, being in, a confined space, though that would be terrifying, too. It's not like being, closed in a box, but, that does still, would still bother me. Luckily, I'm very rarely closed in a box, but, it's why the bits in, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, where you have to, squeeze through the tight underwater tunnels, really freaked me out, and I didn't enjoy those at all. It's because I'm a bit on the claustrophobic side, but it's not just about being in a tight, confined space, it's about being in a space that you can't walk out of. So, being on the London Underground doesn't bother me, at all, because, it regularly stops and the doors are regularly open. So I know that at any point I could, go up to the doors, and at the next stop I could just step off. There's nothing to stop me leaving the train, pretty much every 2 to 3 minutes or whatever. So that's fine. And when I'm, driving a car, that's fine, because I can just pull over. If I ever wanted to, I could just stop the car, pull over, and get out of the car. Okay, now, airports and airplanes, however, they bug me, because once you're through security, you can't leave. There's no fresh air. You can't go back through. You're trapped inside that building. And once you're on an aeroplane, you're trapped on that aeroplane until it gets to its destination. You cannot just step outside for a breath of fresh air for a couple of minutes midway through. And, potentially if you're unlucky and you run into turbulence, you might actually not even be able to walk around the cabin. You might be, stuck, seat-belted into your seat for any period of time. And on one of the 4 flights, because I had to go from London to Washington, Washington to West Virginia, West Virginia to Washington, Washington to London, because West Virginia doesn't have a major international airport, there was actually a period of extended turbulence. So I was just kind of sat in my seat being slightly terrified for an extended period of time. So that was fun. That was great fun. So, it's Saturday morning, and I'm feeling okay. I can respond to flights in various ways, because when I'm flying and I know it's going to happen, I get really anxious. Like, I do get really anxious about flying ahead of time. And my body, because it's really helpful, decides to respond to me being anxious about flying by basically coming up with various phantom physical ailments. Like, I'll always feel like I've got, like, you know, a really bad cold or flu or something the day I feel like, oh my god, I happen to be sick the one day I can't be sick, and I'm not, I'm absolutely fine. But my body will have just decided it must be sick because of all the rest of it. And I'm not actually ill in any way. And like, once I sat down on the plane and I was kind of like, okay, I'm here, I just have to sit here for the next. It's actually not that far, actually. If you get your if you get a good tailwind going on, then you can do that flight in, like, I think, like, the way back was like under 6 hours or something. Maybe it was, no, it was under 6 hours. I think like the way back we did in like 5 hours 45 minutes with a bit of a tailwind, which was, no, I think it was like 6.5 or 7 going, which isn't so bad because I used to have to do LAX. I used to work in Los Angeles a bit, so I used to have to go from London to Los Angeles, and that's like 10.5, 11 or something. So it's nowhere near as bad as that, which is good. That's very, very welcome indeed. So it wasn't as bad as I've done in the past. So once I was sat down on the plane, I was okay, calmed down a lot, absolutely everything's fine. So I went over to Washington. Is it called Dulles? I don't know how it's pronounced. Washington Dulles or Washington Dulles? I'm not sure how it's pronounced. So we went over there. And, like, when I originally agreed to the trip, I assumed that what we were going to do is we were going to head straight on from Washington Dulles straight on to, like, West Virginia somehow. I don't know, coach, train. Probably not coach. I didn't realise how kind of far it was. America, quite a big country as it turns out. So I didn't realise it was quite that far. But in the end, they didn't want to do that. They wanted to do it the following day. And I found out later, the reason the travel was kind of staggered was because the event I attended was, like, the international press and YouTubers event. So people coming from all over. Some people coming from Australia, some people coming from all over Europe. I think it was mostly Australians and various shades of European who were coming in for this. But we basically came in like slightly earlier than some other people. So we arrived on Saturday, like late afternoon, and we all got like Ubers into Washington itself. The original plan was we were going to do a bit of sightseeing, but the plane was slightly delayed and we took ages getting through the US immigration checks. So in the end, we just went out to Georgetown, which is like the studenty district, which was very lively and happening. For like, this was actually, I suppose it was a Saturday night, so I guess it's not too surprising. And I can't remember what time it was when we arrived. I think it was like something like maybe 8:30 p.m. or something. So I guess, yeah, it makes sense. It was kind of bustling. It didn't feel like 8:30 p.m. to me. It felt a lot later, obviously, just because of the time difference. And we just had some nice burgers in a sports bar. And yeah, the plan was we were going to go afterwards to like see like just do a bit of like tourist stuff, like go to the Lincoln Memorial Monument, whatever it is, thing, and like see the White House and whatever. But in the end, only 2 people were up to it. This was like a group of like, I think it was at least 12, possibly a few more. Was that just when I think that was just the English people that were there at that point. So it was just us 12. I think 2 people were up for sightseeing and everyone else was just like, I just want to go and sleep, actually. So we all just went back to, this was just the little hotel outside the airport. Now, the following day, we had to get to West Virginia. Now, to get to West Virginia, it would have been a very long way by rail or road or whatever. So they'd actually chartered a couple of really small planes. So we actually had like this little private flight between Washington Dulles and one of the West Virginian little airstrips down the south of West Virginia, which was actually worse because these little private planes are really small. Like, really small. Like, you are squeezed in a tiny tube and they don't feel like proper planes. They just kind of feel like they're just going to fall out of the sky. So that was the worst flight for me. That was the worst flight because it's actually the smallest plane I've ever been on, and it was really cramped. Like, when I got in, like, I'm not a tall person, but like when I got into it, like my head was pretty much almost pressed against the ceiling of the plane when I just stood up. So I got a bit nervous and freaked out about that. It was a really short flight, by the way, because this is just Washington to southern West Virginia, which is like 40 minutes in the air. It felt a lot longer. It felt an awful lot longer because I was not having a fun time. I was not having a fun time at all. So that was kind of the worst flight, but I got through it without anything major. I just sat very, very still and just focused on breathing in, breathing out. Everything is fine. We got to West Virginia. And then it was just a short little coach trip to Greenbriers, which is where we stayed, which is where we were staying, as well as being where the event was being held, because Greenbriers is going to be in Fallout 76. In fact, they already showed it. It was in the very first little trailer that they showed at E3 with a bunch of robots wandering outside. And the resort is absolutely flipping lovely. All right, would be a lovely place to take a holiday, except we were kind of on the busy side, because by the time we got there, it was Sunday kind of afternoon. So we basically had time to get to Greenbriers, just go find some rooms, dump our stuff down, grab a bite to eat, and then it was pretty much straight on to an event which Bethesda wanted to do on the Sunday evening. Now, this is the one that I put in my video that went out late last week. This is the event where they kind of gave us a tour of the actual US bunker. Now, I know you're probably thinking, John, why did you cut straight to like the party and not show the actual bunker? We weren't allowed to film. We were not allowed to film like the front of the bunker or the way through or any of the secure areas. Even though this thing was retired back in 1992, you're still not allowed to film in it. I don't know exactly why, but like the Greenbriers staff were really firm on this. Like we literally had to hand over all of our phones and camera equipment before we were allowed in, and they were given back to us when we actually got to like the Bethesda party room inside. Yeah, they were very firm on that. So that was fun. We got a little history lesson on, like, you know, the nuclear bunker and all of that business, which was kind of cool. And they kind of showed us some really old films that were made, like, about it, and, like, you know, the rooms where the broadcast would have been made had there been nuclear war. And then it was, you know, it was slightly horrifying. Slightly horrifying as well. One thing that I noted in particular is Bethesda have been shortchanging us on the vaults, which is, you know, like how in the vaults you only ever get like 10mm pistols. Like in this vault, like it was made clear that the security personnel that would have been on site, they had shotguns and automatic rifles and all sorts of things. Like Bethesda has been shortchanging us, saying, oh yeah, in the vault, like it's only like security batons and 10mm pistols. There were security batons that looked a lot like the security batons in Fallout. That's certainly true. But yeah, there were also a bunch of shotguns and automatic rifles. So I feel shortchanged, quite frankly. The real life armory of the real life vaults is a lot better stocked than the ones we typically see in the Fallout games. Ooh, there was a fun thing here that I kind of forgot to flag in my video. Because I didn't really want to kind of, you know, publicly drag Bethesda about this, because I'm not sure whether it was a mistake. Because I actually made a bit of a joke about this to, like, some of the other people that were there, which is when we got to the party. I just thought, you know, it would be really appropriate for Fallout if, like, you know, there was no water because something had gone wrong with the water ship or whatever. So while you can get hold of, like, you know, alcohol and snacks, like, water's really hard to come by, and haha, we'll actually be playing in survival mode, ha ha ha. That was true. There was no water available. Like, I went to the bar because I was feeling a bit parched. Said, can I just get like a bowl of water or a glass of water or something? So, oh, I don't have any water. So, oh, great. It was booze or some form of like cordial stuff mixed with some soda, but there was no water. So in the end, I just asked for a glass of ice, and I just waited for nature to take its course, because the room was quite warm once it was full of people. So by the time we were pulled through to the next event, I got myself about half a glass of water just by allowing some ice to melt. So that was good. But yes, genuinely, this was a vault where the water chip wasn't working. So that was pretty damn good. Then we got pulled through to the really big podium room, which I put in the video, which sadly I wasn't allowed to record any of what was said, and I can't comment on it now. But Pete Hines did kind of come up, and he gave us a little welcome and a bit of a chat about 76, and talked about a few things about the game, which I can't discuss, sorry. I can tell you next month. Like, ask me next month what Pete Hines says, I'll tell you what he said. But I can't tell you just yet. He didn't speak for that long. And then we went through to the big party room, which had like the Vault-Tec donuts on the wall. That was what was in the video as well, where there was like the really interesting buffet and all of like the games and whatever. And I played a ping pong doubles game where my partner was the head of PR for Bethesda. And the two guys opposite were... Which ones were they? They were two journalists. They might have been from IGN. And me and the Bethesda PR guy kicked their asses. We kicked that IGN ass. It was beautiful. So that was that. I didn't stay for too long, to be honest, because I was still feeling like not quite on America time. And like every single day, just like assume every day I wake up at about 5 a.m. And then I just force myself to just lie in the darkness, just like dozing as best I can till about 6 a.m. Then I just say, screw it, I'm going to get up, have a shower, whatever, and have an early breakfast. So basically that was what every single day was like. Like, I went to bed like as early as I could. I universally woke up at 6 a.m. and then I pretty much just kind of got on with my day from there. So, that takes us to the end of Sunday. That's when the party was. And then we're into Monday. Now, Monday was game day. That was actually the day we got to sit down and do a whole bunch of stuff, which was very, very cool indeed. Notice again, can't tell you about the actual day itself in huge detail. All I can say is that's the point where I got pretty much a half day with the game. So there was like 2 sessions, one group of people and the other group of people. So I had myself a half day with the game, recorded some footage. That's the footage you'll be starting to see tomorrow. I don't dare comment on anything else, even in vague terms, in case I accidentally give something away. But that was game day right there. And then that evening was the evening where we had the really nice outdoor dinner that was in the actual video, where we had the falconry, and there was actually, well, what I showed you was actually a hawk. That was actually a hawk being released in that video, and then a massive owl. There was actually a falcon earlier in the evening that I didn't actually record any footage of, but I actually got to hold the falcon. Apparently, like, the hawk and the owl are a bit too, like, big and potentially nasty to be held, but the hawk was, like, you know, pretty chill. No, not the hawk, the falcon. The falcon was pretty chill. So, like, they had a spare glove you could put on. You could just, like, have a falcon on your hand, which is really cool. So I got to actually hold a falcon, and there was the tomahawk throwing range thing. I did all right at that. Alright, I had one go at that, where you get yourself 5 tomahawks, and like the goal is to make the tomahawk actually stick in the target. I got 2 of my tomahawks actually in the target on my first go. 3 were kind of misses or bounce off or whatever. So 40% strike rate was not bad. There were people who did worse. Like, I assumed I'd be terrible at tomahawk throwing. Turns out, not so bad actually. And then, yeah, I was sat down on this lovely kind of outdoor meal that went on into the evening. And, like, you know, when we started, it was nice and light. By the time we were done, it was, like, pitch black. And then we kind of, you know, walked back to the hotel, which was, like, a 15-minute walk away. So, I mean, it was all pathed. It was all very pleasant, actually. And, yeah, then the following day, it was pretty much just checking out. So we're into Tuesday. Now. Tuesday was a bit of a weird day, because Tuesday, like, we had to check out first thing and get the bus back to the airstrip, get another one of these little small charter planes, and get back to Washington. So we were back in Washington at about noon. But the thing is, our flight home to the UK was a red-eye that wasn't going till 6:30. So we had, like, yeah, a 6-hour stopover in Washington Airport, which is long enough to be annoying, but wasn't really long enough for us to go into Washington, D.C. Because really, if it's about a 6:30 flight, you want to be kind of at the airport ready to go at about 4:30, just in case. So that's already down to about 4 hours. And to get, like, to the Washington touristy districts would have been, like, I don't know, 45 minutes on fairly clear roads, but what if you run into traffic there or back? So you could very easily say 2, maybe, you know, just carefully leave 2.5 hours just for traffic. So you've not got much time actually in Washington, so I decided not to go back into Washington. I think like 1 or 2 people did go back into Washington for just a bit more. I decided to just stay at the airport because I brought a couple of books to read, so I just read my book in the airport for ages and got the red-eye home, which was very quiet. Which I suppose is, you know, the advantage of coming back on like a Tuesday into a Wednesday. Because, yeah, that just means, you know, there's less people. Like, had I done the red eye on, like, I don't know, Saturday into Sunday or Sunday into Monday, I'm guessing it would have been a lot busier. But, like, some people spread out and had, like, entire rows to themselves back in economy. So it was absolutely fine. When I say back in, I was in economy, just to be clear. Just to be clear, I don't get to go in like premium economy or business or anything. Just because technically, you know, this was like a business trip for me, that doesn't mean I fly business. No. Just economy. Don't worry. I was right at the back of the plane. But yeah, people were kind of stretching out over multiple seats, which is kind of cool. And I'll say I had a disappointing movie experience. Because, actually, this was actually on the way rather than on the way back. I watched The Incredibles 2. Hadn't seen that before. That was disappointing. I mean, next to Incredibles 1, Incredibles 1's great, I love Incredibles, but like Incredibles 2, wow, I sure enjoyed that 5-minute extended slapstick scene between the baby and the raccoon. that sure didn't drag on and on and on and on. And why is this happening? Why is there this stupid slapstick? Why? Oh, it was so not good. No. And the fact that the central plot boils down to this woman's secret plan is to make superheroes illegal, which they already are at the beginning of the film, and only stop being illegal because of the work that she helps to do. So yeah, literally, like, her plan is, I hate superheroes that are currently illegal and I want to make them illegal, but they're already illegal, so I'm going to make them legal so I can make them illegal again due to my convoluted plan. Just don't help them become legal in the first place! How did nobody look at that and think, well, that's a pretty major problem with the plot? That the thing that the villain wants to achieve has already been achieved at the beginning of the film and only gets unachieved by the villain's own flipping work, but whatever. Very odd. And then I watched Solo, a Star Wars story, and I want to tell you how good I thought that was, which is, when I was catching up with Claire, just like sending us some Twitter messages, like after I landed, I told her what films I saw, and I'd forgotten that I'd seen Solo. Within 4 hours of watching it, I forgot it existed. I remembered, like, half an hour later when I was looking at my text and just thinking, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't fill enough of the flight. I must have seen one more film than that. What else did I see? And then I heard someone behind me in the queue for US immigration mention, oh yeah, Solo was a bit disappointing, wasn't it? I thought, oh yeah, the disappointing Solo film. I literally forgot it existed within 4 hours. So, that was terrible. Anyway, it's not terrible. It was just like so bland and generic. I just literally forgot it existed, which is kind of worse than just being awful. Like, a film that's so awful it's memorable is kind of fun in its own way. Solo was just there, just being beige and vanilla. I shouldn't say vanilla. I like vanilla ice cream. Vanilla ice cream's lovely, but it was very beige. If that film was a colour, it would be beige. Anyway, that's probably enough about my trip. I don't dare say anything else unless I accidentally do something horribly wrong and break embargo. Let's jump into some questions, shall we? John, could you extensively play Assassin's Creed Odyssey and complain like Rise, Son of Rome? Okay, I was originally planning for yesterday's video to be Assassin's Creed Odyssey, but Ubisoft are kind of weird. Which is, we got in contact with them and said, can you send us Assassin's Creed Odyssey, just send us some like early review codes so we have time to make a video ready for launch. They were like, yeah, that's fine, we're going to forward this to the right person. And then we never heard from them. This happens with Ubisoft a lot. Like, you'll email one person and say, hey, looking forward to this game, could you sort us out with that? And they're like, yes, absolutely, this is the right person, hello, and the other person goes, hi there, great to receive your email, we'll sort that out for you, and then they just go dark. I have a long-running theory I've been grey-listed at Ubisoft, but only half the people there got the memo. So like, some people are like, oh yay, it's many a true nerd, let's forward that email to the right person. And then the person who actually gets is like, oh yeah, many a true nerd. He, I don't know, didn't enjoy Far Cry Primal, which I didn't particularly, so he is now blacklisted forever. So I don't know. Like, I thought we'd already have it, and like, Ubisoft gave us an indication that we would, but then we didn't get it. And like, if we've got an indication from Ubisoft they're gonna give us like free review code for a game, then I'm kind of reluctant to spend like £60 or whatever buying it, if like they're about to give it to us anyway. So we'll see. At this point, like, I'm planning to do something for it like next week or something like that. And given I've seen like little snippets of, yeah, the way they do the Battle of Thermopylae, don't worry, there's going to be things to complain about. John, have you ever played Magic the Gathering? No, it wasn't my thing. I know Claire did some miniature painting when she was younger. I was never into Magic the Gathering at all. So it's one of those things that I don't really kind of dare do on the channel now, because I feel like, it's got a fan base that enjoys it, and watching someone stumble in and get everything wrong and be wrong about everything might not necessarily be welcome. So I'll keep Magic the Gathering Arena and its open beta in mind, but no promises. Just in case you were going to have a top secret trip to maybe play Fallout 76, could you ask them about the pre-war bonnet from Fallout 3 and New Vegas making a comeback? Alright, I want you to know, I saw this, before I went, and I actually made a list of questions to put to Bethesda during like the dev roundtable session that I was able to go to. And then I was told the moment we stepped in that we only had like 15 minutes and there were like 6 of us. So I felt like it would be very rude to the other journalists in the room to monopolise any time asking a question like that. That's a bit of a jokey question. So I'm afraid I only asked the most serious questions that I actually had to try and kind of get to grips with the game mechanics and whatnot. So I'm very sorry. I did actually mean to ask about the pre-war bonnet, but in the end time was just too tight with the senior dev team, so I was not able to ask Pete Hines about the pre-war bonnet. Hey John, upon replaying New Vegas the other day, I ran into a question I couldn't answer. What is New Vegas about thematically? Now I do actually have a theory about this, which is I think that the overriding theme that runs through all of New Vegas is, I'm not sure there's like a particularly pithy way to say this, I'm just going to say it in a slightly awkward way. It's, which way do you look when you're deciding what to do with society? Because the theme of looking backwards or looking forwards comes up a lot in New Vegas, across the base game and in the DLC. Like, the Legion is a very obvious example of that. They're literally looking back at the example set by the Romans, and in terms of, like, the structure and the hierarchy and how they've tried to redo their armor and whatever. They're just trying to, like, they're cosplaying as Romans, and Caesar himself understands, like, the thematic importance of, like, some of the things that happened in Roman history and how he could recreate those and how it might be useful for, like, legitimizing his empire and whatnot. And, you've got the NCR that's more kind of forward-looking, but, like, I don't think the game takes a side, by the way. I think, like, both of them run into problems. Like, the NCR is charging forward through progress as best as it can, and it's done a lot of progress so far as it's grown a lot, but it's run into problems of, it's become bloated and ineffective and corrupt and whatnot. And, and then you've got Mr. House, who's got this interesting duality to him, which is, he clearly looks back very fondly on Vegas as was, and he is literally an old world relic. But on the other hand, he's the one talking about, colony ships out among the stars. That's his goal. So he's dipping a toe in both pools there. Meanwhile, the Brotherhood of Steel, their quest when you speak to them with Veronica is all about, hey, the Brotherhood is too stuck in its ways. It needs to look forward. It needs to change. It needs to evolve. It needs to embrace working with factions that have, historically been our enemy, and if you don't, you'll be destroyed. And then there's the themes, of course, of Old World Blues, which is very much about the danger of being trapped in, like, people just kind of trapped in their memories of the past, and the phrase Old World Blues itself, and Dead Money, which is very much, again, about people who have been caught up in this old world drama that gets uncovered as you play, and people being caught in these old traps. And Zion's got a lot of history as well. And then, of course, you hear about Hopeville and the settlements there in Lonesome Road. Like, I think there's a lot in New Vegas that's about societies that try and build themselves by looking backwards and recreating the past and kind of try and recreate something that used to exist is not a good idea, while still being very aware of, if you try and look forward and you charge forward, there are dangers to that as well. And there's a lot of duality to a lot of the societies we run into, where they're simultaneously both backward-looking and forward-looking at different times and in different ways. So I definitely think it's about, how do you build a society? How do you kind of, what do you base it on? Do you kind of rush forward into the future, or do you look backwards? And I'd say, New Vegas has warnings about both strategies, but probably comes down on the side of progress as opposed to looking backwards in the end, albeit, caveated with a lot of warnings that nothing is perfect. Is that a single theme? I feel like that's a bit too much to be a single theme, but to my mind, it's the idea that runs through the whole thing at least. I'm going to quote this question directly because I find it a fascinating question. Do you wonder how irradiated people called Alexa may be now due to the Amazon Echo? Now, I'm going to assume the question is, do you wonder how irritated people called Alexa may be now due to the Amazon Echo? But I kind of prefer the original question, do you wonder how irradiated people called Alexa may have become due to the fact that, I don't know, they hear people calling out Alexa and they just kind of rush through and get hit by all the radiation coming out of the Amazon Alexa? I don't know. Actually. I'm not called Alexa, I'm not called Cortana or whatever, so I've never experienced that myself. When Google invents, like, you know, a little thing that's like called the John, they probably wouldn't do that. Now I say it out loud, no. But if they ever did, then that would probably get annoying, yes. John, I originally fell in love with your channel due to your voice. Any diction tips for aspiring YouTubers or podcasters? So, I do actually have a view on this. It's not exactly like anything particularly complicated or anything, but if you go back and watch my early videos, they sound very muted, I think, because what you're hearing right now and what you hear in my videos is not my day-to-day speaking voice. I've just kind of grown into having, I call it a stage voice because I just kind of use the term from the theatre. I don't know if there's like a special term for YouTubers or podcasters. For the most part, it's just a question of like using the same sort of techniques that you would do if you were on the stage. And I did a little bit of stage stuff when I was at university, nothing major or anything, all very silly stuff. But, you know, I did a bit. And you just kind of have to, you know, obviously you'd never go out onto the stage or like give a presentation to a big room and use your normal voice. But neither would you get up onto a stage and start shouting. You just have to come up with a voice that's good at projection. You have to kind of project your voice and kind of, you know, and be very effusive with it. So you just kind of have to get used to that. And that's just a case of practice. Like, I think if you just kind of, you know, say you watched, you know, a random video of mine, like, you know, from the very beginning of the channel, then 3 months after that, then 3 months after that. Like, as time goes by, you just kind of hear this coming in. But, like, what I notice a lot whenever I kind of, you know, look at any small YouTubers who've ever trying to, like, give advice or whatever, is a lot of them sound really muted, and that doesn't mean they themselves are muted or they can't improve. It just means that they haven't got over it yet. Because if you're not used to doing it, sitting in a room by yourself and kind of very loudly and projecting-y and effusively talking about what you yourself are doing on a screen in front of you, it feels really odd, and it feels kind of awkward and embarrassing, and your brain's like, why are you doing this? This is really weird. And like naturally, you'll become quieter. You might even be quieter than you are in your day-to-day life, just because you feel a bit awkward about what you're doing, and that just takes time to get over. So it's a question of practice, but like, you know, I'd say people who have experience in public speaking or debating or stage might arguably have an advantage. So those things might be useful things to do if you happen to, like, you know, still be at school or university and those opportunities are available to you easily. John, have you ever played Valkyria Chronicles? No, but they have been recommended quite a lot. Obviously, we're in a busy time of the year right now, but I would not bet against them showing up fairly early into 2019. On the topic of Red Dead, though, I will say, if I have the time to do it, I wouldn't mind trying to squeeze in an Undead Nightmare mini-series before Red Dead 2. Don't tell anyone that, by the way, that's just between you and me. Because I don't know if I'll actually, you know, have time to make it happen, because there's a lot happening between now and Red Dead 2. So, we'll see, but that's something I'm vaguely thinking about. The next question is simply the word Honeycrisp, which I was very confused by, so I looked it up and realised that is indeed a type of apple, and I did ask you what the best type of apple is. You're wrong, though, because it's Pink Lady. Pink Ladies are amazing. I just started university this last month, but I'm not living on campus, as well as only doing 2 days a week, and I'm a little stressed out about missing out on the social side of uni. Any tips for handling this stuff? Okay, so this is kind of a bit of a sideways answer to that question, which is kind of, I wouldn't worry too much about the fear of missing out, as it was called like a couple of years ago. I'm not sure if that term's still used. How is that supposed to be pronounced? Because like that was like properly acronymed for a while. I always referred to that as FOMO. So I wouldn't worry too much about FOMO because, and this is a really kind of sideways answer, I did live on campus full time when I was a student, and I missed out on quite a lot of the social side of uni because back then I was very shy. I was very shy and introverted next to how I mean, you know, I'm still quite introverted today, but I'm less ridiculously shy and awkward than I used to be. So I kind of missed out on a fair bit of the social side of uni. But like, you know, it's kind of weird. Like, as I went through my life, like, you know, when I left university, like, for a few years afterwards, I kind of looked back and thought, oh, that's such a waste. That's such a waste. I missed out on so much. But then a few years after that, I came to the conclusion, wait, hang on, no, I didn't. Like, there's no point in forcing yourself to do stuff that you don't personally want to do, that like wasn't in line with the sort of stuff you enjoy doing, just because the uni experience is supposed to involve certain things. Why on earth am I sad about the fact that I didn't go like clubbing or whatever when I have no interest in clubbing? And then I realised, hang on, the things I like actually doing, you know, hanging out with small groups of close friends and doing stupid, silly, nerdy stuff with them, that's stuff I did do at university. So even though I didn't like have the traditional university experience, like I had a university experience that worked for me, and it took me years to kind of realise that. So I would say don't worry about missing out on the social side of uni, because there's no like one size fits all for that sort of thing. Do what makes you happy, do what works for you, and don't get too stressed out with what other people might be doing. John, I think my brain is broken. Well, there's only so much I can do with that. I'm a big fan of games like Fallout, Skyrim, etc., but for some reason I cannot find it in myself to love them in the same way that I loved N64 games like Conker's Bad Fur Day, Zelda, and other games such as the original Pokemon. Do you think it's because certain aspects of these games are actually better than modern games, or is it that I was born in the early 90s, therefore I'm destined to be addicted to nostalgia? Well, I've got to say it's probably nostalgia. There's a good chance that there's a lot of nostalgia there. You know, just kind of, you know, my instinct would be, and that's because a lot of stuff has improved. Like, well, I guess it depends. It really depends, because just due to technical limitations, a lot of games back then were fairly closed up and linear. Like, you know, the examples you give, Conker's Bad Fur Day is very linear in a lot of ways, and Zelda Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask are both pretty linear, like, you know, Termina Field and Hyrule Field. By modern standards, they're not big at all. And, you know, for the most part, like, you know, say Death Mountain, Ocarina of Time. Like, there's one path up it, then there's one branch where you go to Goron City, or when you've got the bombs, go up to the top. Then it's one path, one climb, one bit at the top, and then you're either into the fairy fountain, you're into the volcano. It's very, very small and limited. I mean, I think the magic of Ocarina of Time is it took a game that was really not even that big, but it made it feel big. Death Mountain feels huge, even though it's actually very small, and that's a really, really cool conjuring trick. Now, if you're more into linear games than open games, given openness seems to be hugely praised in this day and age, then I can see why. But equally, there are still some very nice linear games floating around. I was actually talking about this recently. We did my video on Batman Arkham Asylum. I think, like, you know, if you're into games like that, then, you know, things like the Batman Arkham Asylum game can actually potentially work very nicely for you. I think, interestingly, actually, I think in some ways, Ocarina of Time has, I won't say it's aged badly, but it hasn't aged beautifully. The dungeons are still very good. The dungeon design was always amazing, and they're really, really fun, interesting dungeons with some fun, interesting puzzles. The bosses in Ocarina of Time are arguably very, very easy and very, very simple. You know, they're quite showy, and they're quite fun, but they're also very easy to deal with. The game's difficulty is very, very low. Even if you're not bothering to hunt down heart containers, the difficulty of Ocarina of Time is very low. It's a very easy game. You have ridiculous amounts of health, and no enemy really hits that hard at all. You know, in short, I can't really prove one way or the other whether, like, you know, from your personal perspective and the things you enjoy, whether for you those games are better or whether this is just nostalgia filter. I suspect it's a bit of both. Tabby pictures, pretty please? Oh, go on then, Claire. Roll the tabby pictures. Oh my goodness, she's such a cute little fluffy cat. Look at her fluff. John, if you could pick any time period in recent history, i.e. 50s onwards, which, if any, would make a good backdrop for an open world game, and what would it entail? Okay, I'm going to say the 60s, because No One Lives Forever was a great game set in the 60s, and one of the Time Splitters 2 levels was a ridiculous spy parody set in the 60s. I just feel like, yeah, the 60s is colourful and interesting, isn't used hugely in games. It's been used a lot more in film than in game. It would just be a fun time to do a stupid spy thing. Like, I'm not going to say Austin Powers an open world game, because, you know, Austin Powers has one decent film that hasn't, some parts of it haven't aged desperately well, but the first film's still pretty darn good, and then a couple of terrible films. But something, you know, vaguely of that light-hearted parody-ish tone, like it's just as a parody spy thing, that'd be fun. Let's have one of those. John, have you ever tried Alien Isolation? Oh no, I don't have the courage for that, but I do have a plan for a Halloween game. It's not Alien Isolation, but I do have a plan for one, assuming I can get hold of it. John, how do you feel knowing that the Venus flytrap is actually native to the US, in particular the states of North Carolina and South Carolina, states that border Virginia and very near West Virginia? It makes me feel very glad to not be there anymore. That's how it makes me feel. John, have you ever seen Reno 911, a hilarious show? I have not. I'm afraid I know nothing about it, but I shall go and give it a little bit of a look-see after this if I have the time. John, which characters from your series do you think are most comparable to, various Greek mythic characters? Okay, so Achilles. The thing about Achilles is, while he's, you know, well known as like a mighty hero, he's also just like a massive dick and incredibly vain and very selfish and incredibly violent, and also kind of unpredictable. So I'm actually going to say Evil John. Evil John from Kill Everything would make a good Achilles. Hector. Hector. In fact, you know what? Hector and Aeneas I'm going to put together because they're very similar characters, which is slightly wet do-gooders. So, who's the best slightly wet do-gooder that we had? Maybe Minnie from the Nuka World Level 1 run, because, you know, she was very, very good at violence, but she had basically good intentions, alright? She wanted to go on a journey. She just wanted to go on a journey and get to Nuka World, like Inish. She didn't want to found Rome, she just wanted to get to Nuka World and then make it hers. So I'm going to say maybe Minnie for that. Odysseus. Odysseus is interesting. When people think of Odysseus, they think, oh, the great tricksy schemer. But the thing is, like, that's only really true in the Odyssey. In, like, the Iliad, he's just, like, a normal bloke, to be honest. He's not really characterised as particularly clever at all. That was kind of a later thing. Back in the days of the Iliad, that wasn't really a thing. But let's go for the more famous interpretation, where he's like a schemer, like in Sophocles' Philoctetes, for example, something like that. Who was, like, the most schemy character I ever had? Oh, I'm actually going to say King Catastrophe, our current King Catastrophe in Crusader Kings 2, because he is certainly smart, but, you know, not all of his plans work out that well. In some ways, I've kind of picked that one due to some events that haven't actually quite happened yet. So, yeah, just keep an eye on King Catastrophe. He's going to go a little bit Odysseus in some ways as time goes on. The next question is a bit long-winded, but it basically boils down to a discussion about things like resolutions, because just to give you the kind of the short version of this, basically, if I were to record in a high resolution like 1440p or 4K, and then I were to upload, like in those resolutions, even if you don't actually watch those resolutions yourself, YouTube gives you a bit more bandwidth, so YouTube compression isn't quite as severe, because videos go through like 4 stages. What I see on my screen when I'm playing, what is recorded by my capture program, the file that is created by me rendering after I edit what I captured out of the game, and then what appears on YouTube. Each stage, the quality goes down a bit. So what you're seeing on YouTube is not an accurate representation of any of those 3 stages that came before. So the suggestion is, even if it's only 1080p footage, if I were to upscale it to 1440p, then potentially I get more bandwidth, so the 1080p would look better, but the 1440p would probably look kind of bad because I'd just be upscaling it, and that's never a good idea. I don't know. I am running some tests, actually. One thing I am doing, that's coming up very soon, is the Fallout stuff is going to be in 4K, just because, well, Bethesda set it up to be running in 4K and to record in 4K, so I literally had the 4K footage. I cannot do that on a regular basis because, like, yeah, I just can't find a way to make 4K footage run nicely in any of my programs. Because, like, the preview window in my editing suite, even if I lower the quality right down, it stutters occasionally on 4K because the file it's reading is so bloody big. So that doesn't work. And I don't want to be playing games native 1440p or 4K for the most part, because unless there's proper resolution scaling, and most games do not come with proper resolution scaling, and even if they they do, it just makes the resolution look weird and stupid because it's just upscaling the UI, and then kind of it just looks kind of blobby and blurry against the background. And if I don't upscale the UI, then it's unreadable on small screens. So 1080p feels like the best kind of compromise between quality and stuff is still readable on a small screen. So I'll have a think about it. I'm doing some tests into, some ridiculously high resolutions. I'll see how people feel about that when those videos go out, and maybe I'll run some tests at some point. I'm a little bit busy at the minute, just kind of trying to get back into UK time and also deal with all the Fallout footage that I've got. But I'll look into it at some point. John, I'm curious, are you following the Elder Scrolls Blades? Honestly, not. Like you say, mobile stuff I'm just not personally into at all. Like, I don't look at that and think it looks exciting, and I'm not going to force myself to play stuff I don't think looks exciting, because I don't think anyone wants to see me like playing a game I'm just like moderately lukewarm about. It wouldn't be a good experience, so probably not, but I might look at it in my own time and then make a decision whether I think it's worth a video later. John, with the Patroncast seemingly getting longer every month, would you consider doing 2 smaller casts every half month? No! Let the Patroncast stand, damn it, huzzah! What's your policy on making inside jokes during the live stream chats? This is a really interesting question. So, the thing that you've got to remember is, like, I think you and me, by which I mean, like, all of you and, like, everybody in the community versus me have a very different view of it, which is when a person in the community makes a perception -1 joke, that might be the only time in their life they've ever said perception -1 to me. And they might think, oh yeah, that was an appropriate time to say it. Like, I get the same few recycled jokes all the cocking time, and it gets a bit boring. It gets a bit tiring on occasion to just get the same stuff over and over and over again. Like, for me, it stops being funny, not because, like, it's not funny, just because if someone basically says the same thing to you over and over again, it just kind of loses any of its joy that it originally had. Like, you know that episode of The Simpsons where Bart accidentally becomes, like a bit of a star on the Krusty the Clown show because he accidentally breaks the vase and says, "I didn't do it," and then that just becomes his catchphrase, and it's just like him sitting sadly in the classroom with everyone in his class and the teacher standing around him in perfect silence, and he just kind of sighs and said, "I didn't do it," and they all just cheer because it's what they wanted. Sometimes being a YouTuber can be a bit like that, because when every single person that makes a comment is doing so in isolation in their own private world, they don't realise that the thing they're saying is something that happens a lot. And, like, very often if there's, like, a single, like, good fun reference or joke to be made from a video that's like, what's something I missed or whatever, like 17 different people will point it out. So, that's why sometimes I don't acknowledge them. It's just because sometimes some of them can get a little bit on the tiring side. As we've seen a lot of Stellaris and Crusader Kings 2, will we potentially be seeing Europa Universalis 4, Victoria 2, Hearts of Iron 4, etc.? Yes, entirely possible, though I'm not sure necessarily, like, do the import thing, where I bring the Nation of Cornwall into Europa Universalis 4, just because I don't know, like, how big Cornwall's gonna be. I'd probably rather start fresh, to be honest, or if I were to bring Cornwall forward, there's a good chance I would choose to not be the person that plays as them, but we'd see. Like, it's possible that introducing, like, Cornwall and making Cornwall into a mega empire and then bringing them forward might actually, like, ultimately lead to the game being less fun in Europa Universalis 4, because, whatever Cornwall does, it might, like, overpower the world a bit. I'll see. I'll have a think about it. And, as a follow-up question, I am aware that there is indeed a new Vegas mod to Hearts of Iron 4, but of course, like, I can't play that till I know Hearts of Iron 4. So, that's some way off, but yes, very likely that will happen at some point. Is there a game that you'd love to make a full series out of, but don't think will be entertaining for a long series? Interesting question. You did mention, of course, Watch Dogs 2, which I did kind of vaguely plan as a series, but it really dropped off in the views. I kind of feel that way about some of the modern Total Wars. I kind of do them anyway because I like the modern Total Wars, but people seem really uninterested in the modern Total Wars, like Thrones of Britannia, Warhammer 2. Both of them did not do well on the old views, so I don't know where I'd really draw the line. I guess it kind of happens a fair bit with Assassin's Creed. Sometimes if I ever do a series, like I started a vague idea for a series for Syndicate in Assassin's Creed, and that just didn't really seem to draw people in. So I don't know where I really draw the line there. I don't know is the answer to the question. I kind of just make the call series by series. Have you ever played any of the Oddworld games? I do not believe I actually have. Although I am aware, yeah, there are a couple of HD remasters floating around, so I wouldn't bet against seeing it at some point or other. John, in regards to Fallout 76, do you plan to do a joint series with others like Matt and Nerd Cubed? Interesting question. I honestly don't know, because I haven't played enough to really kind of get a good feel for what's the best way to make that. I suspect it'll be a bit like all over the place. Like sometimes I'll do bits on my own. Like I'll probably do like, say, the first part when I can actually do it properly in the beta. And I'm not under like the time constraint of only having it for like an afternoon, so I can take my time a bit more. I'll probably do just like on my own, interact with people just like, you know, in passing. But I'll almost certainly try and do various collabs as like videos that might be like really heavily edited, like multi-POV stuff or something, I don't know. And then, you know, I'll also be doing live streams, and during the beta period, of course, we know that it's not going to be on all the time. It's going to be on sometimes and not on at other times. So, you know, I might just, you know, quietly live stream, and I might have people with me or I might not. You know, I'll definitely do something with both the Matts, Mattophobia and Up Is Not Jump, and also Dan, Nerd Cubed. Of course, I'll probably try and do some other stuff with some other people as well. At various points, it's probably a good, you know, because, you know, it's a very social team game, but, you know, you can drop in and out of different people's sessions and universes really easily. So, you know, it's probably a nice, easy one for me to, like, you know, do, right, this episode's on my own, episode 2 is with Dan and Mattophobia. Episode 3, it's just Mattophobia. Episode 4, I'm back on my own. Episode 5, I'm with some other Fallout YouTuber. Episode 6, back on my own again. Episode 7, oh, this is actually a live stream or something, I don't know. Maybe I'd keep the live streams out of, like, the numbering system, and, like, the numbering system would only be, like, short edited videos. That probably seems like a decent idea. So, yeah, I don't know, honestly. I haven't had enough hands-on with the game to know exactly what that ought to look like. It'll probably evolve over time. Since you've been live streaming for a while now, I'd like to know if there's anything you've learned that's unexpected or interesting about your audience that you hadn't gleaned from your time doing YouTube videos exclusively. Interesting question. I'm not sure there's like any individual fact, like, particularly. I guess maybe, like, you know, the strength of the Australian community always surprises me. The fact those guys keep showing up, despite the fact I keep putting the flipping streams, at times they're massively inconvenient for them, which is always interesting. It makes me think that the YouTube demographic data is miles off, because we know that data is not accurate. It's just YouTube making its best assumption. Like, according to the YouTube data, like, the community is like 92% male or something. It's only 8% female, but every time I, like, speak to the community, like, you know, when I just kind of look at people's names, or when I chat to people, or, like, you know, there's the chat or the donations or anything where I get a better feel for the gender balance, it feels nowhere near that imbalanced. So I think YouTube's making some judgment errors there. In fact, I think YouTube's kind of stuck in a logical circle, which is it looks at someone, if it doesn't know whether they're male or female, it's saying, okay, what are they interested in? Oh, they're subscribed to a gaming channel. They must be male. And that just kind of reinforces the circle of stereotypes. So I suspect that's what's going on there. I mean, I think, like, the live streams have reinforced to me that data cannot possibly be right. The gender imbalance in this channel is not that much. Can we get some more 60 parsecs? I wouldn't bet against it. Just like 60 seconds, that video got a lot of views. So, yeah, potentially quite feasible. John, any chance of you playing a game like Lemmings on the channel? You know, I never played Lemmings originally, I don't think. So, I'm not quite sure how I would. You're asking, yeah, there's a few older games here. Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, Oregon Trail 2. These are, yeah, old things I'm not even sure how I would do, to be perfectly honest. Yeah, I'm not actually sure where you even make those run in this day and age, so I can look into them, but no promises. I'm not even quite sure, yeah, how I buy those and how I play them. I just took in a stray dog and he needs a name. Any suggestions? He appears to be a staffy mix. He's all white if that helps. Ooh, If he's a stray dog, I feel like, he'd probably do with a confidence boost. I'm going to say he ought to be Lord Straylock. Possibly Lord Straylock the Magnificent as a full name. Because, he could just do with a bit of a pep up in his life right now. So I'm going to say, as he's a stray, he should be Lord Straylock. Marvellous. John, do you have a creative outlet other than videos? Not really so much an outlet, though. Wait, well, hang on. Does, me reading count as, an outlet? Because it's not really like me doing a thing. That's me passively consuming a thing. But I'm not sure whether you would consider that, as a thing or not. Basically, reading. Reading is the answer to your question. John, who is your favourite artist? Ooh, excellent question. Kind of difficult for me to pick one. I certainly recall there was, at some point, I think it was at wasn't at the British Museum. Maybe it was at the National Portrait Gallery? I can't remember where it was now. But I saw a Monet exhibition at some point, and I really, really loved that. I really enjoyed that business, so I'm going to say that. I'm not super into art, but I did find a Monet exhibition I did see at one point really, really damn cool, so I'm going to say that. John, do you think you'll give Imperator Rome a go when it gets released? Oh yes. And get a full series, and if I can, get to play it early. Me and Paradox are pretty close these days. I'm hoping they'll let me have it early, and it's going to be beautiful. John, what's your favourite FTL but game? I really enjoyed The Long Journey Home, but nobody else did. After the first part, the views just dropped off a flipping cliff, so that never came back, unfortunately, but I did do a small little 3-part series that I thought that was really, really damn solid, but sadly, no one else was interested. I was watching a BBC documentary and they showed a large jellyfish that eats other jellyfish, i.e. without it, there would be many more jellyfish in the world. How do you feel about this horror-destroying horror? I feel good about it as long as it keeps its bloody distance from me, but just in case, I'm just going to keep my distance from the sea as well. John, what is your favourite running gag you've done one on the channel, and why is it Hello Headquarters? It is actually Hello Headquarters. I love Hello Headquarters, and I love the Deadly Premonition series in general. I think it's a beautiful series, and I just absolutely love Hello Headquarters! And it doesn't actually, I think what's nice about it is, I think I've been, very moderate with it. I've not dropped it all over the place, just very occasionally, just in a live stream or the odd video, there's a Hello Headquarters reference just in passing, and it's just there for the odd person who gets it, and I try not to overstress it. So, I just kind of keep it there in the background, and I do actually agree. I absolutely love Hello Headquarters! Absolutely flippin' love it. Good day, John. It's been said everyone has a novel in them. What's your novel? Oh, more than one. I've written several little kind of manuscripts and half manuscripts. My favourite was a slightly weird story about Christmas and all of the various different Christmas traditions around the world all being real and there being the threat of Christmas war and people changing the meaning of... It was very odd. It was very odd, but I wrote a very large part of it. I think there was there actually a complete... I'm not sure whether there was a complete first draft of that. I'm not sure there ever was, but that was years ago when I used to write to my creative outlet before I did this. John, I was wondering how much you like old school turn-based RPGs like Dragon Quest or the earlier Final Fantasy games. So, Dragon Quest I've got no experience with whatsoever. Final Fantasy, I've not played many of the recent ones. Someone I used to live with was really into Final Fantasy 10 and 10-2. Wait, were they pronounced X and X2 or 10 and 10-2? Normally I'd say 10 and 10-2 because it's clearly the Roman numeral, but then 10-2 just sounds really weird to say. I'm just going to assume it's 10 and 10-2. And I think was she into 12 as well? I can't remember. I think she played 12, but she was more into 10 and 10-2. Actually, wait, was 10-2, was that the one with the 3 women who cosplayed in order to change classes? Was that 10-2? If that was 10-2, that was the one she was very much into. Yes. Earlier Final Fantasies. Okay, the earlier entries in the main franchise I never played. Final Fantasy Tactics Advance I really like. I had that one on the Game Boy Advance. I played it a lot. Really, really enjoyed that. That's a great little game. If maybe a bit too grindy when it comes to mastering abilities. It took a long time, especially because obviously you'd always ultimately want your main person to have the ninja dual wielding ability, so you basically get double attacks every single turn, but that required like 999 whatever they were called points, so it took a lot of flipping grinding to unlock that ability. So honestly, if I were ever to do something like that, it would, probably be Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, but that would be a very long series. I'd have to cut the vast majority of it out, so maybe I could just do like a mini-series up to like the first of the... What were those bosses called? The big things that you killed to unlock new abilities, where the first one was like... Was the first one like the tree, where you just had to basically just break the little baubles that came out of its roots, or something? That was fairly early on into the game. Maybe I could do like... up to the second one of those, or maybe the third. The third one was the dragon. That's probably a long way in at this point. Anyway, maybe that at some point. In the last Hello Internet podcast, CGP Grey mentioned he's also creeped out by jellyfish, so you're in good company there. Also made me wonder if you and Claire listen to any podcasts. I do not. I never listen to podcasts. Like, the thing is, I spend so much of my day either talking loudly or listening to myself talk loudly. Like, when it's not work time, I like a bit of peace and quiet. So, like, if I'm just walking out or whatever or having a stroll, I like it to be peaceful. Claire, however, loves podcasts. So, Claire, get in here and tell us what your favourite podcasts are.
I know we've had this question before, so if you've already heard me answer it, I hope you don't mind the repeat. I really love the podcast Soulbones, which is a marital tour of misguided medicine. I can never say the name of that right, but it's a really fun show about medical history. I also love No Such Thing as a Fish, which is a very funny show about weird, funny, interesting facts. And in the same vein, Futility Closet is a really, really great podcast about just weird historical stuff.
John, have you ever grown a beard or had long hair? Oh, this is terrible memories here. So, one time, this was, hang on, what year would this have been? Let me just quickly do the maths here. It must have been somewhere around 2013-ish, 2013 or 2014. I was working in an office at the time, and the office was doing Movember, where you're supposed to just basically... Well, you're supposed to grow a moustache, officially kind of Movember for moustache, but like, I just kind of let everything grow in general. So basically, I just allowed myself to have a beard and a moustache, which I do not normally have for that one November. And I didn't really enjoy the experience, to be honest. It didn't feel right. But then, when I got around to actually shaving it all off at the end of the experiment, I did kind of get the distinct feeling. I remember the exact sensation I had, which is my mouth felt lonely. My mouth felt far too far away from the rest of my face because it got used to being surrounded by the moustache and the beard and whatever. So my mouth genuinely felt lonely for a couple of days and my face felt all wrong. That was my only experience with a moustache or a beard. I occasionally let my hair grow long as a student, but it never kind of like flowed down into beautiful locks or anything. It just became messy. So it's probably good to keep it shorter these days. John, could you give us a full list of the mods you're using for Crusader Kings 2? I don't have them in front of me right now, but I do know for a fact that I showed off the entirety of all of the DLC and all the mods at the beginning of Part 10. So if you go back to the beginning of Part 10, you'll find a full list of everything I'm using there. John, not so much a question, but an idea. Fallout New Vegas Caravan is better than you think. You know, at some point I have actually been thinking I should just basically do a video that's entirely dedicated to Caravan in New Vegas. Because I don't think I've ever actually properly learned the rules. I have no idea what the rules are. So it'd be kind of fun to actually just kind of go around and just try and win a game of Caravan against literally everyone and see how much money you could make. That'd be kind of fun. I might do that as a one-off at some point. John, will you try and keep Dust continuing through the release of Fallout 76 to show everything off? Yes, I absolutely am planning for Dust to actually continue till it reaches a proper conclusion of some description. Admittedly, I don't know how much there actually is left in Dust, because it feels like, unlike, say, Fallout 4 Frost, there are multiple different solutions, where, as far as I can tell, like, no single one of them is, like, the canonical one. So there are multiple different solutions where you can basically pick any of them and say, okay, that's the happy ending or the proper ending. Some are bigger and longer or harder than others. Some of them people seem to think are kind of, even if they're more difficult, that doesn't make them better, that just makes them kind of annoying and stupid. This is kind of the vague hint that I was getting out of what people were talking about. Some people were kind of hinting at Zion and saying, oh yeah, go to Zion, and then like people commenting, no, don't go to Zion, like it's just stupid there. So I'm not looking forward to that. So I don't know. Like, I'm not planning to necessarily show off literally every ending, but at the bare minimum, I would like to try and like get to grips with what the overarching plot of the whole thing is. So, you know, I'd like to go through Freeside, find a way to get into the Strip, because from that note I found under the overpass, it's pretty clear something's in the Strip. And, you know, you've got where Mr. House used to be and the NCR embassy, and, you know, potentially some of the stuff in Benny's room, and maybe Yes Man's floating around somewhere. So, you know, there's a lot of very important locations in and around the actual Strip. So clearly there's going to be something that tells us what actually happened to the world. And we've already had, like, I think some hints about what may or may not have happened that we got out of Motel, formerly Novak. So, yeah, we've learnt some stuff. I mean, the bare minimum, I would like to actually get Dust to at least one of its endings. And then we'll kind of see what's going on. And then again, as I say, I don't know, like, which ending is actually where. Because obviously, like, I don't know exactly whether any of those individual endings are going to be fake outs. Like, I found the note saying, hey, let's go over to flipping Lonesome Road. And then I went there and was like, nope, Lonesome Road is closed. You now need to go through Zion if you want to get to Lonesome Road or whatever. So, you know, I've got that plane down south, but I have absolutely no confidence that that plane's not going to immediately crash and dump me in the middle of Old World Blues or whatever. Because, yeah, when you actually got the boat fixed up at the end of Frost, when you got off the island, that then immediately crashed. That was actually the end of the game, rather than being actually, like, you know, dumping you somewhere different. Like, oh no, you've accidentally crashed in Nuka World. Who could possibly have foreseen this? So that's interesting. That's interesting. I don't know whether, like, any of the endings I've found so far are actually endings, or if they're all part of the same thing I've just found in a slightly unusual order. So, bare minimum, I will get to one actual ending to Fallout New Vegas Dust, but I don't guarantee I'm going to try and find all of them, because I have heard that some of them are just really kind of annoying. So I'll find a good ending that I like, and then I'll see whether I want to keep that going indefinitely in Sunday till I find all of them, or if I want to kind of, you know, start moving 76 over to a Sunday spot. Like, I think 76 will fill a lot of slots, just like randomly through the week during the beta and after launch, but then, like, at some point I might want to move that over to Sunday on the regular, plus a bit of extra random stuff too, just like whenever I happen to be able to do a collab or whatever. I don't know. We'll have to see. What are your thoughts on playing Detroit or Heavy Rain? They've actually been on the shortlist for quite a while. Actually, the one I was planning to play next, I happened to actually just own it, was Beyond Two Souls. Haven't got round to it yet, but at some point very likely. They look like, well, I'm not sure they're necessarily 100% my type of thing, but they look like fun games I can make fun videos out of at the bare minimum. Let's say that at least. You've won a competition and a celebrity chef of your choosing is coming over to your house for a weekend to actually teach you how to perfect any 3-course meal of your choosing. Who would you like to be your teacher, and what 3 courses do you choose? Okay, I'm going to pick Gordon Ramsay, because in the new series 24 Hours to Hell and Back with Gordon Ramsay, he basically now shows up with a massive truck, and I just want him to show up in his massive Gordon Ramsay truck. And honestly, I don't really care what he teaches me to make. I just kind of want to experience being yelled at by Gordon Ramsay. Because, like, I know it didn't actually happen. I know it was, like, staged for, like, a charity thing or whatever. But just, like, the gif of Gordon Ramsay holding 2 slices of bread around a person's head and yelling, "What are you?" And the person yelling back, "An idiot sandwich! An idiot sandwich what? An idiot sandwich, Chef Ramsay!" That's one of my favourite things I've ever seen. So that's just wonderful. And I want Gordon Ramsay to yell at me and hold bread around my head and force me to identify as an idiot sandwich. That's basically my ambition in life. John, any plans on visiting New Zealand? Oh, bloody hell, that's a very long way away. Honestly, no. I'm bad enough with little short hop flights, alright? New Zealand's pretty much the longest flight you can do. In fact, I'm pretty sure you still can't do New Zealand. I think there was, like, there's a way you can get from Britain to Australia without changing now, but New Zealand is still too far away, so you have to change. That's 2 long-haul flights in a row. That's enough to put me off, sorry. We've got a question for Claire at this point. So, how much have you been enjoying Life is Strange 2? Interesting question, because I'm really into it. I think Claire finds it a little bit annoying to edit. But I'm very curious to hear Claire's view and take on the episode and the story in general, yes.
Well, John preempted my answer there a little bit. I can see how Life is Strange 2 would be a really interesting, immersive game to play if, you're coming to it and just playing the game. There's certainly great voice acting. I like where the story is going. I really like the artwork in the Life is Strange games. But for me, predominantly the impression I have of it is that it was really finicky to edit. Anything with a lot of dialogue is going to be tricky because we need to make sure that the game dialogue and John's commentary don't overlap in a way where it makes it difficult to understand or you're going to miss bits of the story. It was a bit tricky, and I had to do it the week before John was going to leave for the US, where we're already quite busy. So I think I would have enjoyed it more if we'd just been able to do it as a live stream, which ended up not working with our schedule. I'm quite looking forward to the live streams, actually, because I think watching John play the game in the streams will be much more similar to the experience that I would have playing the game in the first place.
Hi John, as I think it's fair to assume that Claire cooks all the meals in your house, that's very unfair. Just because I'm terrible at everything I've ever made, that's still very unfair. What do you eat when she goes on holiday? Honestly, it's me and my friend the microwave at that point. Good old microwave meals. I love a good microwave meal. That's 100% fine. Hi John, I'm curious how narrative-based games like Telltale's Batman, Life is Strange, all that do, just in terms of views, often quite poorly. Telltale's Batman was a real low view type of thing, which is a shame because actually I thought it was pretty good. I thought it was one of Telltale's better games. This is a real shame. Life is Strange is really inconsistent. Awesome Adventures of Captain Spirit did really well. Farewell did appallingly. Life is Strange 2 did alright, but I'll probably move it back over to the live stream format because being able to just do it all in one go in the live stream. So the small but, really hardcore fans of that game get to enjoy it all in one go, but it doesn't fill up multiple slots for everyone else. And a follow-up question, well, not a follow-up question, an unrelated question, a second question, on Uncharted. It comes up a lot. Honestly, I'm not in a rush to do it, but I wouldn't be surprised if you kind of saw me do a one-off on each of the games. Wait, there's 4 of them now, aren't there? Yes, there's 4. I swear there was a 4th one. I wouldn't be surprised, but I don't actually have a plan to do it anytime soon. Has there ever been a series where you've dreaded sitting down and filming it for one reason or another? Pretty much every You Only Live Once. That's really stressful to do. Every time you sit down, you think this could be the end of the series and everyone's going to be really disappointed and the community will be massively divided on, should I go back to an earlier point or should I restart, or is that the end? No matter what I decided, it would upset a large number of people and people would be really angry and everyone would yell and stuff. It was really stressful. You Only Live Once is so flipping stressful to make. So, they're brilliant videos. I really enjoy them in a way. And I think they create some really fun series, but they're really stressful to record. Did you ever enjoy South Park or Weird Al? Ooh, I've never actually listened to much in the way of Weird Al. I've heard some of the most famous ones. I wouldn't kind of say I love it enough to be a fan, but certainly I've heard some of the best known kind of parody songs. South Park I was into at one point. I think the point where I enjoyed it best was somewhere between seasons 4 to 9 or 10 or something. I haven't watched it for ages, but there are some really fun ones in there. Things like the Cartoon Wars episodes I thought were really fun. There's definitely been some really great episodes of South Park, I think, but I'm not sure why I really dropped out of it, to be honest. I think it's a bit hard to actually get hold of in the UK. The new series were never just posted somewhere very easily accessible or anything, so I'm not sure there was a reason. I just feel like I'm a little bit behind at this point, though probably there's not much in the way of continuity. I imagine I could catch up on the continuity pretty easily. I don't think the very first season's particularly great, but I think once it found its feet, somewhere between seasons 4 and 10, I think there's some really fun stuff in there. Certainly true. Busy game season coming up. Are you prepared? No. Do you have any idea how far behind we are right now? I naffed off to America for 4 or 5 days and now I'm jet lagged. Alright, we're so far behind at the minute, it's terrifying. Have you ever gone skiing? No. That sounds terrifying as well. That could be added to the list of things I don't enjoy in the slightest. Like strapping planks of wood to my feet and just going 50 miles an hour down the side of a cocking mountain. No, I can do without that. People have like broken limbs and their spines and died doing skiing. I would just generally stay away from any activity that there's a risk of that happening, I think. I think I could do without that. Hello to Unirob and Unirob's brother. So, we were having a discussion about the emperors of Rome, and we came to a question which I think we needed a classicist answer. Fuck, marry, kill for Nero, Commodus, and Caligula, who are, just in case you're unfamiliar with your Roman history, all three emperors who history generally doesn't have a particularly good opinion of regarding their sanity and murderiness. I'm going to say fuck Caligula, because he definitely knew how to put on a good party. Alright. And then I'm going to say probably marry Nero, kill Commodus. Because while all three of these people are well known for being slightly mad and murdery, I think Nero probably has been a victim of more historical rewriting. I think Nero probably wasn't quite as bad as we think he was today, and Commodus almost certainly was as bad as we think he was today. So let's get rid of Commodus, fuck Caligula, and marry Nero, and really hope that I'm right in my instinct he's not quite as mad as, history generally thinks he is. I just want to send my best wishes as well to Dragmire, who let us know that, there's been a couple of tornadoes hitting Ottawa, Ontario, not so long ago, which apparently had a bit of an impact on them. So I'm very sorry to hear that. And I think, the question at the end was ultimately, have you ever been affected by a natural disaster close to you? Myself? Not so much. I don't think. I mean, I've had, I've experienced some very small microquakes, but, nothing that caused any significant damage whatsoever. Tiny bit of, flooding, but nothing too major. Britain is prone to flooding in certain regions. I have, been on floodplains in the past when there have been some problems, but, again, nothing particularly bad at all. I guess the most affected I've been by a natural disaster was, remember when Iceland exploded? That volcano that I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the name of, and they shut down all air traffic coming into Northern Europe. I was over in Los Angeles at the time, so I just couldn't fly back to Northern Europe. So it didn't really affect me negatively, because the company I was working for at the time basically just shouted me free tickets to go and visit some friends of mine up in Seattle, which was pretty sweet. So it didn't really affect me negatively, aside from the fact that I'm a bit of a homebody. I don't really like travelling or holidaying much. I'm much more happy just being content and quiet at home. So being stuck away from home for a long period of time, I found, I got a little bit antsy by the end of it. But honestly, nothing as serious as what you were describing. So I am sorry to hear that. John, if in real life you were to hold a claim to any country or part of the United Kingdom, what would it be? Oh, it had to be Cornwall. I genuinely, this wasn't just a joke or anything. I actually really find the history of Cornwall absolutely fascinating. That Cornish is a culture, and the Cornish language has proved so resilient for a millennium. I find it genuinely interesting. I'd love to be the independent petty king of Cornwall. That'd just be absolutely magnificent. I definitely would want that to actually be the thing, yes. Also, same person pointed out that I have actually been playing, a lot of animal-related theme park builders recently, and suggested I look back at Zoo Tycoon. Yes, that was the point! All of them were supposed to actually be leading up to the big re-release, the Ultimate Edition of Zoo Tycoon, whichever it was, the one that just got the big re-release. There was a big HD remaster, but, I couldn't bloody figure out who's publishing it. We emailed 3 different people and said, hey, is this coming out soon? It's oh, no, that's not us. You want to email these guys. So we emailed those guys. I said, oh, no, nothing to do with us. Email those guys. Third guy said, no, we have no idea what you're talking about. Try this person. Then the fourth person never got back to us. So we were actually planning to do, one of those big Zoo Tycoons that just got, a remaster. But we couldn't, because we couldn't bloody figure out who made it. Which was unfortunate. Hi, John. Do you prefer English or French cuisine? Ooh. Interesting question. It depends what you define by English cuisine, because English cuisine has eaten a lot of cuisine from around the world. It used to be part of the British Empire. So, I do enjoy some good hearty English pub food. A good British pie is excellent. So I'll probably go for English overall. But again, it kind of depends on how you define both of these things, because, yeah, both England and France, probably would call a whole bunch of cuisine theirs that comes as a result of former imperial times. So I guess it depends how you define your terms, but I'll go for England just because, it's getting into autumn. A nice warming pie sounds like just the thing. Well, seeing as I hit gold with Station 11, I thought I'd recommend a book I've just finished, The Million by Carl Schroeder. This is more of a short story introducing an interesting world, still good. Any recommendations from you or editing, Claire? I will pass that over to Claire. I might well look into The Million. Right now I'm just rereading some old Pratchett. But I will be looking for a book at some point. I might well look at The Million by Carl Schroeder, as if it's anything, vaguely of the same quality as Station 11, that might be very fun indeed. But Claire, I will hand over to you for any book recommendations for good books you've read recently.
I would definitely recommend Trail of Lightning by Rebecca Roanhorse. I just finished reading it last night and I thoroughly enjoyed it. This is a post-apocalyptic novel that does this thing I really love, where there's fantasy element and like more sci-fi-esque elements. I guess the sci-fi aspect is more like the setting. Like I said, it's post-apocalyptic, it's set on an Indian reservation, and it's kind of like this decimated future where there's not that many resources and stuff like that. But then the fantasy element is that all this mythology has like come back to the world, and there's gods and monsters and like these supernatural creatures, and our main character is a monster slayer, and basically she like goes around fighting monsters, and it's really fun, really violent though, so take that in consideration.
There hasn't been any episodes of John the Engineer for quite some time. Any projects in the foreseeable future showing off your unconventional skills building a car from scratch or designing alien flying trucky boats? Ooh. Okay, interesting thing. I was planning at some point to go back to, what was it even called? The one where I built the helicopter car and the plane that just span around. Stormworks? Was it Stormworks? I think it was Stormworks. I was planning to try and build a submarine, because there is a system of like pumps in that game, so it does imply you can actually build a submarine. I've no idea how submarines work. No clue. So I might try and build a submarine at some point, so that's something to look forward to. If you were cursed and could only ever consume either sweet items or savoury items, which would you choose and why? Oh, that's easy, savoury. And that's purely because just like, as a matter of, how much of each I eat per day, it massively favours savoury. Like, I eat a lot more savoury than I eat sweet. So if I was eating nothing but sweet, like, I'd be able to keep, 10-20% of what I eat right now, but then have to fill the rest of it with 80% more sweet stuff. Whereas if I just ate savoury, I just have to cut out the sweet stuff, and honestly, that's probably better for me anyway. So definitely savoury. Nice easy question there. Oh, blimey, a second game of Fuck, Marry, Kill. It's come up twice. Okay, this time the contestants are Evil John, Normal John, just like me but like a clone of me or whatever, and Fisto. Okay, so this actually strikes me as an easier one. This one's actually quite manageable. So Evil John you've got to kill, because otherwise Evil John will just kill you. So that's definitely got to be the sensible thing to do, just as a matter of self-preservation. Then fuck Fisto, because that would just be an experience. That would just be the sort of experience you just have to experience once in your life. That's fine. And then marry Normal John, because just, twice as much of me would presumably be twice as fantastic. And then the both of us could, make even more videos even more easily. So that would just be magnificent. John, you still need to update the front page. I know, I've been busy. This trip took up a lot of time. I'll redo the front page and do another trailer at some point, I promise. Of all the companies that let you do secret trips to play stuff, which has the nicest offices? You know what? Creative Assembly's got a really nice office. It's really swish and really nice and cool, and their meeting rooms are nice and airy, and it's all air conditioned, and they've got these lovely trophy cabinets and stuff all over the place. Yeah, I'd say Creative Assembly. They've got a lovely bit of space to work in. 2 questions. Do you think you could make a good video game? Oh god, no. No, I'm going to leave that to people who have got talent. If there's one type of game I'd ever try and make, I'd actually probably try and make a dating game, because they're relatively easy to make, all things considered. For mostly it's just like flat artwork and words. And, I can write words, I think I could, put together a fun little script. There was a lighthearted, kind of like a parody. Not really like a parody, but just a lighthearted take on the dating genre. Maybe something like a post-apocalyptic dating game. That might be fun. So yeah, all I'd really need to do with that would be I would write the words and then I'd use one of the many kind of very cheap, affordable engines that you can use to actually put together a dating game. And then I just need to commission someone else to do the artwork for me, which shouldn't be too much because most of these things don't even require animation. They just kind of use static images in the background where, like, you know, if you want to have a character go from happy to sad, you just literally fade from the happy image into the sad image. So you don't actually need to do any animation, it's just done with fades between static images. So if there's one type of game I would ever consider making, that would be the one. Also, how do you feel about video games as an escape from reality? Ooh, bit of a wide question. If you mean, like, is it a good thing or a bad thing, or, like, do I personally kind of use it for that? Like, I mean, escapism, lots of people do use video games for escapism. I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think a lot of people do use video games as a form of escapism. A bit of escapism from normal life is perfectly normal and healthy. You might need to give me a follow-up question that's a bit more specific, because I'm not quite sure exactly what you want me to comment on in that case. But if it's, do they do that and is it healthy? Yes and yes, I suppose. In the majority of the times you're looking at a game as a one-off, you typically have some criticisms, but you almost never say the game is terrible, instead say something like, has potential, or if you're into X, you'll enjoy this game. Is the reason why you generally don't have bad things to say about these one-offs? It's because I don't play games I actually hate. Like, if I ever sit down with a game and I think this is just awful, I just stop recording and I delete the footage and you never get to see it. Like, I only play games that I think are, at the bare minimum, pretty interesting. Like, interesting is my base threshold. Like, a game has to be interesting to me, even if it's not necessarily, like, great or even good, as long as it's, like, interesting, and thus the right person with the right set of interests might find it worth a look. That's good enough for me to give it a little bit of a look-see. If a game's ever bad, I just don't record any of it. I just delete what I've said so far, and you just don't get that. That's why it's positive. And, like, I've always wanted this channel to be positive, because, like, when I started it, that was really at the height of the, you know, angry British person, like, just constantly tears things apart thing was really popular on the internet. And I wanted to do something different to that. So I always wanted the channel to be positive, so for the most part, if a game isn't at the bare minimum, I think, interesting to at least some person out there, like, you know, it will be interesting to a particular fan of a particular genre, I just leave it. If it's just like, you know, a bad game or a broken game, I just kind of get rid of it, and you just never see that footage. I love Life is Strange 1, partly because it had game mechanics other than just the choices. From what I'm seeing in Life is Strange 2, it's just choices which makes it less interesting to me. Thoughts? Interesting. I mean, I can see where you're coming from. Life is Strange 1, of course, had the time travel puzzles. And what we've seen so far in Life is Strange 2, there hasn't really been a puzzle that's the equivalent of what we've seen in Life is Strange 1. So I'd say that's certainly a valid criticism. I didn't really notice or get bothered by that, however. The thing that I noticed that bugs me a little bit about Life is Strange 2 is you can see the walls. Like, narrative games are fundamentally very linear because you can't have the story diverging all over the place. If it diverges massively in part 1, then, like, by part 3, there could be, like, 6 entirely different unrelated stories happening, where in one story, Sean and Daniel are both, like, you know, in a, you know, a foster home somewhere, and another one, they're, like, on the alien spaceship trying to defend the Earth from the Martians. And you can't have that because, like, then, you know, it's 6 times as much work for the dev team to come up with those 6 radically different paths. It would take huge amounts of time to do, and the vast majority of people wouldn't see the vast majority of the content. So I can see why they can't do that, but the trick in a narrative game has to be that even if a choice is going to immediately reconverge, and what you choose doesn't really matter that much in the grand scheme of what you're about to see, it's got to feel like it's meaningful anyway. And you can't see the walls, you can't see the strings. It's very important you don't see how restricted you are. And in some ways, I think Life is Strange 2 doesn't do that quite as well as the original Life is Strange. And maybe it's because there's not things like the time travel that keep your mind off that. But it does kind of, bug me that, like, you know, in Life is Strange 2, on multiple occasions, you know, characters raise, hey, is maybe the right thing for us to go back? Can we really stay on the run? Should we just go back and turn ourselves in? You know, Sean says this on several occasions, and Brody raises it as an idea, and Lila raises it as an idea as well. This gets brought up several times, and I'm just waiting for the choice to be given to me, therefore, okay, let me make a choice. Do I go back or do I keep going? But the game's not going to give me that because I'm going to keep going towards Mexico versus I'm going to return to Seattle and turn myself in. It's so radically different. The experience in the game will be so different. They can't give you that choice. But if they're not about to actually genuinely give me that choice, why keep raising it as a possible choice? Because if you're going to keep saying, hey, there's this interesting choice where either of these two options could be the right thing to do, but then not actually let us make that choice, I think at that point I start to detect the constraints on me. Because, I was waiting to be given that choice. I assumed that was somehow going to be the choice at the end of episode 1, given several characters kept bringing it up, but then it wasn't. So, I'll agree, I don't think it's as strong as the original Life is Strange, but I'm certainly curious enough about it to want to see episode 2, though because it seems to be a bit of a niche interest thing, I will do it as a live stream, not as a series henceforth. My friend's doing a Classics A-level and me and my other friends keep joking he's turning into you. I want to get him some M&S linen shirts for Christmas as a joke. Any other suggestions to make him John 2.0? My favourite tea bag is PG Tips. I love PG Tips pyramid bags. Get him a box of PG Tips pyramid bags and a white linen shirt from Marks & Spencer's. You'll be well on the way. Hello, John! I've currently acquired a cold from a sick co-worker. Here's a random question. Do you get sick often? Weirdly, no. I'm not sure if I'm just, really cautious because I don't, go out and hang out at parties as much as other people. Therefore, that means I'm not kind of exposed to as many germs, or if I just happen to have a naturally strong immune system. But I definitely think, Claire gets sick a bit more often than me, but that might just also be because she's a bit more social than me. So, could be a bit of both, I'm not sure. The next question is about a very specific Crusader Kings 2 thing, particularly, children-specific traits, thanks to Conclave, because educators can pass on traits from a child to children. I'm going to be honest, I'm not going to open that link. That's the extent of me seeing what's going on behind the curtain beyond what I actually like to know. Because I'm absolutely sure there is a 25% chance that a particular thing could be passed on from one educator to one child. But I don't want to know that. Because if I know that, then I'll just always assign, an educator who is absolutely the best possible educator to a child, and I'll just basically be min-maxing, and I don't want to do that. I just want to play this game as, role-playing and think, okay, I want this person to be, potentially they might be a good spy going forward, so give them that focus and, let someone who's a really good spy and got some generally very high attributes manage them. They'll probably do a good job. We'll see how it turns out. I don't actually want to play Crusader Kings 2, with a little chart in front of me telling me the exact traits that all my tutors ought to have to train children in an optimal fashion, because I'm not trying to play the game optimally. So, thanks for the advice, but I'm not actually going to look into that, because that's, a level of, mechanically knowing what's going on that, I wouldn't necessarily consider it cheating. But it would almost kind of in some way spoil the game for me to know that sort of level of detail. I prefer just kind of, bumbling through myself. I think I'm doing okay. I'm not going to go digging into that level of mechanics. John, I have a problem. I'm about 15 Crusader Kings 2 videos behind. Any advice for closing this gap? Okay. Everybody dies and most people become bastards before doing it. There you go. You're all caught up. John, when watching your Spider-Man gameplay, I noticed you cut out all of the cutscenes. How do you decide which cutscenes to keep in order to keep the story coherent, while also trying to compress a lot of gameplay in a small amount of time? Excellent question. For the most part, what I'll actually do is, while I'm actually playing the game, obviously I won't skip any of the cutscenes, I'll let them all play, and very often I will, comment on them, react to them in some way, and, they'll just be there ready for when I edit. But, if I think, okay, I'm not going to do a series after this, I'm just going to do a one-off. So, if, Character X shows up and goes, I'm so glad I'm not evil. Oh, look, my jar of evil juice. I shall put that on this tall shelf and definitely not accidentally drop it onto my head because I would hate to become evil later. Oh, well, I guess I'll just go into that room now. Hope I don't forget about the jar of evil juice. That cutscene is clearly setting something up. How Eddie Brock's going to come in and take photographs and drink the evil juice later. Because, I just blew your minds with misdirection. But, if that doesn't happen within the, whatever it is, 3 hours or so I'm recording, and I'm not planning to make a series, then there's no point the setup being there, because if so, we've kind of got Chekhov's gun that isn't being fired. Like, Chekhov's gun only needs to be there if Chekhov's actually going to, you know, pick up that gun, load it, and start firing while making some really awesome, witty one-liners. So if by the end of 3 hours Chekhov does start kicking ass and taking names, then Chekhov's gun cutscene and the jar of evil juice gets left in the video. And if, you know, Chekhov doesn't start murdering everyone, then I cut the gun out because there's no point it being there. So I basically keep as much story as is required to actually make the game make sense within the confines of the actual video. Though if I'm thinking there's any real chance I might make a series, I might include that. Spider-Man was an interesting one because, you know, I was thinking, okay, it depends what the response is. If the response is huge, I might do a bit more of this. So do I leave a bit more of the Dr. Octopus stuff in or not? And I decided against it in the end because I thought, you know what, we haven't really gone into huge detail yet. There's a bit of foreshadowing here, but it's nothing I couldn't very easily explain in 5 seconds if I were to choose to do a part 2. So that's how I kind of made the decision with that one. John, why don't you schedule publishing the video, tweets, Reddit posts, tabby pictures, etc.? You think I trust YouTube? YouTube is incredibly unreliable. I definitely would prefer to do this manually because YouTube messes up any time it can. Someone requesting Scum who's going to have a magnificently good day when they realise I've already made a Scum video. In fact, actually it did quite well and I quite enjoyed it. So there's a good chance you might see it again as well. So, good day for you, Stephen. John, have you ever thought about moving to another country, possibly the United States? Honestly, like, I've considered it vaguely insofar as, like, you know, depending on how bad Brexit gets, you know, you can't rule it out, but United States would not be a country I'd consider moving to for the most part. There's plenty of English-speaking nations I'd go to first. Honestly, as someone who's just not from there, I find the gun culture just too weird and scary. Like, genuinely, I would not want to live in the US. Like, plain and simple. Just because the idea of so many guns floating around and such a ridiculously high rate of homicide caused by those firearms, as someone who has not grown up in that culture and thus doesn't have, you know, the idea of a gun as an important, like, cultural signifier or part of a cultural identity, like, I find it really scary. So I wouldn't move to the US. I do like Canada or Ireland or Scotland or Australia before that, I'm afraid. Sorry, guys. Have you ever played GeoGuessr? Yes, actually. You won't find it on the channel, but I did once do a live stream with Mataphobia where I think we played GeoGuessr after doing something else. So if you dig around in the old NerdCube live stream updates, possibly that was back in the days when they weren't uploaded on NerdCube, they were uploaded on the unofficial NerdCube live stream channel. I think you should be able to actually find that, but I can't remember what it was part of. I think it was the second half of a stream I did with Matt, but I can't remember what the first half was. You talk about Seattle a bunch. It's true, I do have friends there, and if I were forced at gunpoint to live in the US, I would definitely choose Seattle. It does seem like a very pleasant city. As a Seattle native, it's all about beer and coffee. What are your favourite types of beer and coffee? Honestly, I don't actually drink beer or coffee, so clearly Seattle has been a terrible decision for me. But I do like sitting in Tully's with a cup of tea. Huzzah for Tully's! Now you have a fair number of hours in Crusader Kings 2, what feature improvement would you like to see included in the game, either in future DLC, a free update, or a major rework in Crusader Kings 3? Now I think I actually understand how pushing other people's claims works. Honestly, I think it's actually, it's a bit too easy to actually do that. Like, I find it really weird that, like, you know, if you're a king, you can basically just pick someone who's got a claim on a foreign duchy, and then you can just give them the tiniest, crappiest little barony, and then you can just basically push their claim, and because they, like, were a baron of you first, they pull the duchy over into your realm. That feels wrong to me. That feels wrong to me because it feels too easy, and like I think a change I would make to Crusader Kings 2 would be I would think that actually when you push someone else's claim, the rules for where they end up staying should be the same as if they're inheriting. Because in inheritance, the rules say, okay, which title that I'm going to possess after you've pushed the claim is going to be my highest title, because that ought to automatically become my primary title. So I would have thought that, yeah, actually, you actually have to, if you wanted to, like, you know, bring a duchy into your kingdom, then the person whose claim you're pushing ought to need to have, at the bare minimum, an equivalent title already in your realm, so they're equal, so he's got no reason to leave. Like, if he's a baron in your territory, and you've just pushed his claim to become a duke, so now he's a duke that's in a foreign land, I mean, wouldn't logically he say, okay, thanks for your help, but, like, I know I was your baron, but now I'm, like, a duke, so I'm just going to be a duke of this land over here, and either go independent as an independent duchy who just happens to like you a lot, or potentially, like, immediately become the Duke of the foreign king. Like, that makes a lot more sense to me. Because otherwise, it's just vastly too easy, especially, like, once you're an emperor, potentially, just go around saying, yep, okay, I'm just going to pick off this kingdom and that kingdom and plonk you down, plonk you down, plonk you down. Because if you just find someone who's got, like, you know, a claim on any kingdom, you can just invite them to court, give them a tiny barony, and then basically say, okay, now I'm going to make you king of England, and you're just going to bring that into my realm because you were my baron? It's like, no, why? That's weird. I mean, I guess it vaguely makes sense because, you know, it's like, you know, a partnership where you put them on the throne, but, you know, they have to serve you as a result of that. But it still feels odd to me. It still feels really odd to me because it's way too easy. And I just think it ought to play by the same rules of inheritance where they have to have an equal or greater feudal rank within your territory in order to actually bring the territory they actually get given as a result of you pushing over to you. Otherwise, they would actually just go independent. Like, to me, I think that would, you know, make things less easy to exploit. Because, like, I don't really want to do the whole barony into king thing or whatever. It just doesn't feel right to me. So, I'd change that. I'm curious about your biggest hopes and worries about the new Doctor Who season. Interesting. Very, very interesting indeed. I like the fact that they are actually kind of, you know, they're mixing things up very radically. It looks like it's not just going to be the Doctor and one companion who is also going to be the sort of love interest. They're actually going to do, like, you know, a big group thing. So there's a big group dynamic going on, which is a bit different. That's fun. So I like the fact that they're trying out something a bit different there. So that's all interesting. My concern is that, like, you know, the new guy who's running the show, he hasn't actually ever written a good episode before, which is a concern. Here we go, let's go over every episode he's written. 42, distinctly average and also worthy of note of being, sitting right next to, that was right next to Human Nature, Family of Blood, Blink, Utopia, Sound of Drums, That's the Time Lord. So, congratulations, you managed to make the only episode in the second half of Season 3 that wasn't amazing. Hungry Earth and Cold Blood, I barely even remember them, they weren't very good. Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, average, okay-ish. Power of 3, okay-ish. And then, that's actually it. Other than that, it's just like little mini-series like Pond Life and PS. And then we're straight into, the first episode of the new series. So, I am very concerned that the new showrunner never has actually written an episode that I look at and think, that was a good episode. But then again, Stephen Moffat wrote loads of episodes before he became showrunner that were really good individual episodes. Then they made him showrunner and he couldn't write a bloody plot arc to save his life. So maybe, it makes sense to just go the other way round. Oh god, he also wrote Cyberwoman in Torchwood. Oh no. Oh bloody hell no. Oh, that's not good. That's not good at all. As a game recommendation, I might suggest Deep 6. You play the pilot of a deep space exploration and mining ship, and let's just say there hasn't been too much maintenance or attention to worker safety. Sounds interesting, I may well give it a look-see. Next question is about when exactly I would be live streaming Life is Strange 2. The answer basically boils down to when I'm allowed to. I believe typically, like episode 1, we were allowed to live stream it one day before general release. So, as a result of that, likely that'll be the case going forward. So the live stream would... Actually, you know what? The reason I would have live streamed Life is Strange 2 episode 1 when I was originally planning to was because, it would have been a good thing to stream midweek to provide a bit of cover for the fact that there was going to be the Fallout 76 event when I couldn't yet quite talk about that. So normally I'd probably just do it the following Saturday. So there's a few days for you to play it first, because typically these things tend to actually launch the episodes. I mean, they tend to launch midweek. So you've got a couple of days to play it yourself, and then I'd kind of do the live stream on a Saturday. So you will have a couple of days to play it for yourself, and Claire will be on the chat, so if people do put spoilers in the chat, she just won't tell me, so that'll be absolutely fine, so I can be safe from spoilers at the bare minimum. John, I've just started university doing war studies. One of the first things we're doing is the Peloponnesian War, more specifically the causes thereof. I was curious as to your take on the matter, as there seems to be some level of debate around the exact causes between Thucydides and modern historians. Interesting. I'm trying to remember now. I don't recall there being like a massive source of contention there. I mean, Athens being a bit of a dick, slowly building up a significant empire, building up significant volumes of troops and navy, fortifying itself, and then starting to be dicks towards Spartans' allies. I don't see that as unsurprising that Sparta and their allies would eventually get a bit aggrieved about that, and eventually it would get a bit fighty. So you might just be a bit more specific, I'm afraid. Do feel free to follow up with me next week if you've got a more kind of specific question about a specific cause or a specific event or what have you. But I've never seen the Peloponnesian War as like a massively controversial topic for kind of why it began. I think if you look at the players and the history and the actions during the peace ahead of the war, it's not too surprising. I wouldn't use the word inevitable, but it does feel like, yeah, the board was set up ahead of time just from the way Athens was acting that it was going to happen. And a recommendation for another type of apple. I'm going to mispronounce this, a glaçades, meaning frozen, because some parts of the apple are so sweet they look ugly, like they froze in the tree at some point. Fascinating. Oh, blimey. Okay, we've got a follow-up question from a previous one. So, remember a previous question that showed up at a Patroncast before about someone who I believe was getting married and Red Dead Redemption 2 clashing with the honeymoon? Yeah, unfortunately, the same person has now just realised that, of course, the Fallout 76 betas are also going to clash with all sorts of stuff. I'm sorry. You're on your own on this one. You're going to have to sort that out with your wife-to-be. John, with the Crusader Kings 2 expansion Holy Fury having at least some focus on your beloved Hellenic culture, do you have any features, events, or even some insignificant flavour you'd like to see? Yes, I did see this. I can't really comment on it yet because it's only been in one fairly brief dev diary. I did see that there was going to be like some Hellenic specific events. There was going to be like a Hellenic pantheon where you can build temples, and then if someone else takes over, they don't get demolished. They just kind of sit there inactive until a Hellenic culture person actually moves in. I would very much like to actually, play as the Hellenic culture, because I think they were saying either you could rebuild the Holy Roman Empire and then flip to Hellenism, or alternatively, like if you're in the right part of the world, there's like some form of event you can use to try and flip to Hellenic immediately. Like you can like read like lots of classical plays and decide, Hellenism, that's a good idea. So yeah, I might be tempted to try and do that. That might be fun. So yeah, I'll give that a look-see at some point, but until I actually know what's really involved, I can't really comment on what should or shouldn't be in it, because I don't know what they're already planning to put in it, but all I've seen is that dev diary, though I may have missed something in the meantime. Sorry, I've been a bit out of touch with things since I've been in America, so I'm afraid I don't know too much about it, but it's hard to say, because of course, you know, the whole thing is set in the 11th century onwards, so what Hellenism in the 11th century onwards ought to look like is interesting. I mean, I'd like it to contain lots of fun little historical Easter eggs and jokes and whatever, and I'm sure it will do, because Crusader Kings 2 is very good at that sort of thing. And a second question from the same person asking about worthwhile video essays. Interesting. I don't watch a huge number of these. I will say one I did enjoy is, you'll probably find this one amusing. So obviously, you know, Fallout 3 is Better Than You Think was kind of created as a sort of answer to Fallout 3 is Garbage by H. Bomber Guy, which I don't think is necessarily that great in terms of like the methodology. However, I will recommend H. Bomber Guy's video essay on Sherlock, which I think is very, very good. So there's no beef between us, we get on just fine. I recommend one of his other video essays. I think that one's very, very good. John, I think you could enjoy Factorio. I think I could as well, but I was actually looking at this the other day. Not imminently, bit busy at the minute, too many games coming out, but watch this space, not too long away, I would say. And the same person also recommends the game Automation, a game about designing cars and car engines. I swear I've already looked at this and tried to make a video and I just could not make it run nicely. So I think I've actually already tried, but I'll double check, see if I'm lying to you. I think that's correct though. My question for you is, what is the most scary or dangerous animal encounter you've ever experienced? Ooh. Interesting question. What is the answer to that? I can't recall ever running into anything massively dangerous. Once while I was visiting a family member in the US, there was a massive, great flippin' snake floating about. What was it? I can't remember what type of snake it was. I'm not familiar with snakes, and I was like 8 years old at the time, and it was like under a rock that was like, I don't know, 5-10 meters from me or something. It was pointed out to me. It had some form of rattle to it. It definitely had a rattle, which makes me think rattlesnake, but I might be being a bit oversimplified with my snakes there. I'm not sure if you can just say, well, it had a rattle, so it's a rattlesnake. Possibly lots of snakes have rattles. Probably that, I guess. And also, when they tore down the Berlin Wall, did that make Germany an open concept country? Yes, it was totally an open plan country, 100%. Interesting question here, where, yeah, it seems to basically be... A lot of people have suggested, like, adding additional difficulty onto Fallout 4 You Only Live Once, when other people have kind of said, you know, Fallout 4 You Only Live Once will actually be more difficult than previous ones because it's more shootery, there's a lot more bullets flying all over the shop, and, you know, you've got things like survival metrics to pass in, and radiation having a direct, immediate impact on health and stuff like that. So, what's my position on adding extra rules? Honestly, like, you know, it's an entertainment thing. If I think that adding an extra rule will make it more interesting or less predictable, I will do it. Which is why I think like the rule I'm most comfortable with for Fallout 4 You Only Live Once is some variant of I'm not allowed to use guaranteed spawns of legendaries. Because otherwise there'd be no reason not to just run to Overseer's Guardian, the Instigating Laser Pistol in Diamond City Market, and Righteous Authority. And once you've got those three, you are very, very well set up. And they're all very easy to get hold of pretty quickly. So I would feel a lot more comfortable if I was not allowed to use any of those. Because I think, you know, that's not because I think the game needs to be made more difficult. I just think if I don't introduce that rule, it will be very predictable. Because it's very clear that that's the logical thing to do. Because there are three very, very powerful guns for different reasons just floating around that I absolutely want to try and get my hands on as quickly as possible. So, to me, like, you know, I'll add in additional difficulty if it makes the series more interesting, unpredictable, entertaining, and I think some rules do that. That's kind of the guiding principle I tend to use anyway. Do you think the UK will have another general election by the end of next year or in 2020? I would strongly suspect we will have another general election next year anyway, because, you know, the walls are closing in, politicians are painting themselves into corners. I suspect we might have to have a general election if the government is incapable of getting the votes to achieve any resolution to Brexit. There might have to be. So I suspect that very much is likely to happen. Absolutely. And is there a chance of a second Brexit referendum happening by then as well? That's a really interesting one because no one seems to want to talk about it too much that's high up in a political party. So no one seems to want to really advocate for it except for the Lib Dems, who are never going to have power and very unlikely to hold the balance of power, so it kind of doesn't matter. I mean, I guess that could be a very good, convenient fudge if a bunch of politicians would like there to be a second referendum because it helps get them out of the corner they've painted themselves into. They could say, oh no, we have no choice but to go into coalition with the Liberal Democrats, and their condition for the coalition was there has to be a second referendum. Well, we don't want it, but our hands are tied. Sorry, we have to. So that could be a way that everyone manages to just fluff their way out of it. So that could happen. What unnerves me is I don't know whether a Brexit referendum would necessarily be won by Remain. That's the thing that concerns me about a second Brexit referendum. I don't know which way it would go. So, it's kind of, yeah, I'm not sure whether there's a point to a second one, because it might go the same way, and if it goes the same way, then that will definitely shut down the debate for decades to come. It might be more sensible to say, you know what, and I think this is maybe why people aren't talking about a second referendum in huge detail right now. Possibly they're saying, okay, maybe there needs to be a no deal and a couple of years of that. then would be a good time for a second referendum. It's like how, the Scottish referendum people aren't pushing, or some are, but not everyone is pushing for another Scottish referendum immediately. People want to do the referendum at a time when they're most confident they can win it. And I think right now, some people might be holding off on a second referendum until they're confident it is going to go the way they think it ought to go. Possibly, anyway. Last month you mentioned a big mistake in Crusader Kings 2 you couldn't mention yet. Which one was that? I think I was referring to King Hector getting himself eaten, if I recall correctly. Unless that was before, I think I was talking about that. Apologies if I was referring to a different massive mistake. But definitely at some point I did mention, there's a massive mistake coming up. And it was Hector getting himself eaten, leading to the rise of Queen Euslace. I think that would have been the one, yes. You've checked out Divinity 2, however, will we get a playthrough? Possibly, but I would need to sit down with the game and learn it a bit first. I feel like it's the game that the series will be much stronger if I understand the game at least a little bit. So I don't have time for that right now with all of the Fallout stuff and Red Dead, Hitman 2, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, everything coming out. But at some point, possibly, it might even make a good live stream series. And have you ever heard of Endless Legend? Yes, in fact, I think I've played Endless Space, one of the Endless Spaces. Did I play Endless Space 2? Yes, I think I played Endless Space 2 ages ago. So I'm familiar a bit with Endless Legends. I've spoken to the devs. I'm pretty sure I own it already. So certainly it is a maybe at some point or other. I noticed that when you put out one video in a day, it's usually at 10 PM UK time. That's quite late in the UK to watch for bedtime, especially if it's a long one. Is there a reason you prefer 10 PM slot to the 8 PM one? Yeah, it's to work for the Americans. Like 10 PM, I think for me, the reason I think that's a really nice slot is it's just okay for the Brits to watch before they go to bed, unless it's a really long Crusader Kings video. But like mostly it should be okay for the Brits to watch before they go to bed. But 10 PM UK, the Americans are also just starting to get home from work and school. So, it's there for the Americans as they get home for the evening, and the Brits can still catch it at the end of their evening. That's why I kind of think it's kind of the optimal slot, which is where I put kind of what I think is like the biggest, best, most likely to do well video of the day. What was your last search on Google? That apple that was mentioned above, right at the beginning of the Patroncast. I had to look that up because I wasn't sure what it was. John, if you ever play Oblivion, you should consider the all +5 attribute modifiers mod. If you don't pay attention to min-maxing in vanilla Oblivion, it's very easy to end up with an underpowered character that makes combat unfun. This mod tones down considerably. I don't think I'd ever, play a game for the first time modding it to make it easier. I just, pay attention, it would be fine. If I ended up a little bit underpowered, I'd sort it out somehow. I can't imagine myself ever modifying a game to be easier on my first playthrough. That somehow doesn't seem quite right. I've been really enjoying Fallout Dust. I wonder if you're going to do Far Harbor Level 1, Fallout 2, or Fallout 4 YOLO next. Can you tease with anything? I cannot, because until I know, how big and how popular 76 is, and how long I want to do that for, and what the content schedule for that ends up looking like, I do not know what or when is going to be next. Sorry, I've no idea yet. In Crusader Kings 2, is it just me, or do the "oh god, this royal person is awful" people tend to end up doing well, whereas the "oh, this person has the best numbers ever" people tend to end up becoming Satanists or getting eaten by cannibals? Oh, it's all part of the fun, but yes, that has rather happened so far, you're not wrong. Any chance of a Bard's Tale series when the current schedule calms down a bit? Maybe more likely to be a live stream, to be honest. I mean, I thought it was it was pretty good. I wouldn't say I was a massive fan of it, not really series fan, but maybe a live stream. If there was one game that you wish never existed, what would it be and why? Advance Wars Days of Ruin, because it took Advance Wars and it ruined it, and for that alone it should die. Do you have a game that impacted you the most and possibly changed the way you do things in real life? Just curious, as I have a few crazy as it sounds. Interesting. I cannot think of a single game that, has changed the way I do things in real life, with the exception of games with catchy enough soundtracks that I sometimes just kind of wander around singing or whistling to them to this day. So I think like Mass Effect 2 and the Suicide Run theme at the end, I'll catch myself just kind of humming or whistling that all the time. So besides catchy soundtracks, I'm afraid not, no. What's the craziest thing you've done, either because it was spontaneous as hell or because you were underprepared just because it was weird and wacky? I have an idea of what the answer to this is. I'm not going to give you the details. I'm not going to give you all the details. Let's just say that once upon a time, I was visiting an old friend who had some alternative tastes in various fashions of her life. And she was part of a club where other people with alternative tastes in various aspects of their life occasionally gathered to be alternative together. And I happened to be visiting her, and it happened to be one of the nights this club met. So she said, "Do you just want to come along?" And the alternative was just, because I think it was just visiting her in town at some point, and there was no one else around town, so it would have just been like, me just sitting around on my own otherwise. I said, yeah, sure. Why not? That was an interesting evening. It was very alternative. It was more alternative than I was expecting. There were so many chains and chandeliers. I'm not joking. That's not just me throwing out random words. I have a very, very strong memory of an interesting incident involving some chains, a pulley system, and a chandelier that will stick with me till the day I die. And that's all the information you're getting. Crazy Australian backpacking round Europe here. I think this has been asked before, but could I get some recommendations from Editing Claire for lesser known places to visit in France? Go ahead, Claire!
I'm not sure how much help I'm going to be for lesser known places to visit in France because I haven't travelled a whole lot in France myself. I would definitely recommend visiting my hometown of Lyon because it's beautiful. It's a relatively large city. There's a lot of things to see and do there. There's a lot of lovely food to eat. If you do go there, I would recommend taking a walk on the banks of the River Rhone because they've been all redone. And you can basically walk from one end of the city to the other if you want. There are riverboats with bars and restaurants on them so that if you want to just eat by the side of the river, you can do that and it's lovely. And then also if you go to the old city, just look for museums or walks or things that you can do that revolve around the history of silk, the silk trade and silk weaving because there's a lot of really cool history to find out about there.
What is every Hitman game's best and worst level? Okay, original Hitman game, best level, traditions of the trade, worst level, whatever the kind of name of the last mission was, because that mission was just stupid and ridiculous. Hitman 2, best level, difficult. Very difficult. I personally have a huge fondness for the final level in Japan, where you're in the castle, but honestly, all of Japan is really, really damn good. So, I'm just going to say Japan in general. Screw it, that's cheating. I'm going to say Japan in general. Worst is... Oh, that's also in Japan. That's the Hidden Valley. No, not Hidden... Is it Hidden Valley? The first part of Japan. Okay, right. All of Japan, apart from the bit where you're just going through the valley, is amazing. And the bit of Japan where you're going through the Hidden Valley, that's the worst bit of Hitman 2. Contracts, Siberia, the second level, is the worst. It's boring and linear and uninteresting. And Britain, kind of the manor house, is probably the best one, because it's big and open, interesting. Blood Money. It's got to be New Life for best. Worst is probably... interesting. Maybe the one set in I can't remember what it is now, the place where you're getting the guy out, the hospital or whatever it is. Just gets a bit more linear and there's not that many options, and the ways that you can kill all the guys in a subtle way are just really obvious. So I just find it not desperately interesting, to be honest. What's next? Absolution. Oh, that's interesting. I think actually the gun shop's my favourite level in Absolution because there's loads of fun little stuff hidden around. It can be really simple if you just want to make it really simple, but there's loads of stuff to find if you dig around in it too. Worst is just a tie-up between there's so much bad stuff in Absolution. I'm just going to give it a tie to any of the missions that are just stupid, get from point A to point B areas where it's just a chase. There's no actual, assassination in a game called Hitman, because most of Absolution's levels don't have assassination in them, because obviously that's not what we're there for. Bloody IO. New Hitman. Best level has got to be, what's it? The Italian town one. The Italian town one is wonderful, great one. Worst level is probably Colorado, just because it's all military, so it's just not particularly interesting, because there's not enough, fun civilian stuff to do in it. And Hitman 2, we don't know yet. There you go. How was staying in the Greenbrier Hotel? Did you have any fun activities or just play 76 the entire time? I've made a video on that exact topic. Hi John, it was my birthday this month. Can I get a classic John birthday song? Happy birthday, dear Sarah. Happy birthday to you. I cut it down a bit due to time constraints, but you got the gist. What's your take on multiplayer games seemingly muscling out big single-player games? I wouldn't say that's really a thing, to be honest. God of War and Spider-Man came out recently and both sold really well to widespread critical acclaim. Sure, we've got Fallout 76, but the vast majority of the time Bethesda is still publishing big traditional single-player campaigns, so I'm not really seeing that, to be honest. I mean, okay, fine, Red Dead is going to have Red Dead Online or whatever it's called, but it's still going to have a massive, big, interesting, really cool-looking campaign regardless. We just had Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Hitman 2 is about to come out with, the focus overwhelming on single-player. Honestly, all of the big releases that are coming up in the next month or two are overwhelmingly, single-player stuff. So I don't really see that as a problem that needs to be solved, to be honest. It seems to all be fine to me. Does Patreon give you a bunch of stats like YouTube does? Nowhere near as interesting, but then equally, the engagement that a person has with Patreon isn't as in-depth as the engagement that a person has with a YouTube video, so it makes sense that it's not. I do have an analytics suite, but honestly, it's very bare bones. It doesn't give me that much interesting information at all. Would you consider doing an FTL no pausing challenge? No, that sounds evil, and definitely not. What game would you like to have Agent Francis York Morgan make an appearance in? Ooh, Red Dead 2. I'd just like him to be one of the characters who just hangs around in your camp, just sitting in the background, being delightfully odd. That would be marvellous. If you could ban one aspect of current popular game design, what would it be? Loot boxes and just microtransactions in general. You should buy the game and then have the game, to be honest. I mean, some places do them better than others. I haven't actually played Odyssey yet, but I have seen screen caps of the huge amount of stuff you can buy in it. And that doesn't look good. For the most part, I'm okay with buying of cosmetics. I don't like cosmetics in loot boxes, where you buy the loot boxes, because that seems exploitative to me. I think the best you're gonna get, if there has to be microtransactions, and I don't really think there has to be, but I think, the best you've probably got is you buy a currency, and then you use that currency to buy a cosmetic, and the cosmetic will never provide any benefits to gameplay. Nothing in the shop provide any benefit to gameplay, and you always know exactly what you're going to buy and what the price of it's going to be, so it's a fair exchange that you can kind of enter into on a fair basis. That's the best we can do, but even then I'm not really 100% comfortable with it. It's a scandal that we don't have Great Britamp merch. I have considered it. I genuinely have considered it. The problem is I don't really own the rights to the Antagonizer helmet or the Chinese stealth armor design. They both belong to Bethesda, so I sadly am not allowed to create merchandise and then sell it for profit because I don't actually own the rights to that stuff. You should check out a game called Deep Rock Galactic. That has been on my shortlist for flipping ages. In fact, it's already out, I'm pretty sure. I kind of had it on there since before it came out, then it came out. So it's been floating around. In fact, I think I might own it. I might have it already. At some point, yes. Do you know when Tabby's birthday is? No, Tabby was a rescue. So it's possible her original family, because she spent 7 years with one family, got lost, showed up 2 years later with a badly wounded leg, and then came to us. So maybe her original family will know when her birthday is, but we do not. We sadly do not know when Tabby's birthday is. So because we can't give her a present on her birthday, we just give her a present every day in the form of treats and love. Have you ever watched the movie Blast from the Past? I have not, but apparently it's vaguely Disney-related to Fallout insofar as there's an overseer-like character. That's kind of cool. Would you consider the not-so-secret trip that you took to Greenbrier your first vacation since you went many a full time? Probably is, That is probably the longest period I've been without kind of doing any work, given I didn't work on the Saturday, I didn't work on the Sunday. I did record some stuff on the Monday, then I didn't work at all on the Tuesday, and I did a bit of work on Wednesday, but I was absolutely exhausted and jet-lagged to hell, so it wasn't that much. So, yes, that will probably be 2 days off in a row. That's probably the longest period of time I've been off the entire time I've been working full-time for the channel. That's almost certainly true, yes. If you had to choose an interesting non-American location for the next Fallout game after 76, where would it be? Oh, I've said it before, I say it again. I think Britain, just because we don't have many guns floating around, so guns would be a lot rarer, and they would also have a very different social and cultural significance because we're not used to seeing guns around, so someone walking around with a gun is, threatening, it's not normal. Someone with a gun slung over their shoulder would be, terrifying to an average British person. So yeah, I think it would make an interesting, different change. That would be fun at some point. Would you consider playing Papers, Please again as a live stream? Has been suggested before. I don't think it would be a good live stream because while I'm actually doing anything, I've got to be 100% focused on the thing. And then, to give the chance for super chats and chat and Claire catching up, there would just have to be a big pause between each day where nothing is actually happening, because it would be just pretty much, a black screen with some text on it. So I personally don't think it would make a very good live stream, I'm afraid. Is the first part of your Fallout 76 Let's Play, whatever that's going to be titled Fallout 76 is Better Than You Think? No, because I'm not a clickbait bastard, don't you worry. Dead in Vinland just got puppy DLC. I saw this on Twitter, yes. £1.69 on Steam and you get to adopt and train a puppy. That does sound adorable. I might give that a look at some point. Just, not during this ridiculously busy period. Someone flagging, of course, The Missing, Swery's first new game in 4 years that looks like it's probably going to, come out before The Good Life, potentially. Will I cover it? Absolutely, I will cover every Swery game. Swery's amazing. Do you identify as a country road, a city block, or a suburban street in how you experience life? Oh, suburban street for me. Closest to the city, but still, with a little bit of a foot in the countryside. Claire is definitely more of a city block, city girl through and through. Have any of your Games of the Year list changed over time? Oh, interesting question. I believe there's only been one instance of that where I demoted Civilization 6 away from my Game of the Year and gave it to Stellaris instead, because Civilization 6 just kind of stagnated for a while. Admittedly, since that point, it has picked up Rise and Fall, which is pretty good, if not exactly amazing, whereas Stellaris is just going from strength to strength. It's had the Apocalypse and the 2.0 update, and 2.2 looks really, really cool. I've been reading all the dev diaries on that. So yeah, I was very, very happy to swap in Stellaris as a Game of the Year when it wasn't originally going to be highlighted as such. But I did say when I gave Stellaris a runner-up that if Stellaris keeps going in a good direction, then it would deserve to be Game of the Year in the future. So, I did flag that this was a possibility. Would you consider including awards for things like Best Soundtrack, Voice Acting, Script and Animation? Ooh, interesting. I might give that a think at the end of the year. Honestly, I'd kind of do the awards very, very quickly. I just kind of look over all the videos I've done and just start vaguely trying to rank them. So it's not really a proper award show. But I'll consider giving bonus awards for specific things this year. That's certainly a good idea. When you play narrative games like Life is Strange, how do you decide when to put it on the channel? Well, I think as I was mentioning earlier, the compromise we're going to do this time is, if it's a live stream, it'll be the first weekend after the game comes out midweek. So there will be time for people to play it first, or if people are not playing it themselves, it'll still be pretty fresh and people will still be, hopefully happy to wait a couple of days to see my playthrough of it rather than just looking straight to somebody else's. So hopefully that's a fair compromise. The follow-up question to that is there an initial spike in views on day one when you kind of preview something ahead of it coming out, and then another spike a week later once people have played through it? It's not a spike a week later, of course. People will catch up and choose to catch something later. It's very hard to detect because, if there's just, a little background noise of views that are going to continue for weeks on, you don't actually know whether those people are, just people who are finding a channel, or maybe you're ranking on a particular search term or some reason. I could dig into it, but I'd spend so much time just doing analysis of the data in YouTube Analytics that, it wouldn't be worth it because it wouldn't necessarily be that useful for me to know that. So I might be able to detect it a little bit, but it definitely doesn't form a secondary spike. Not a detectable one, anyway. Which video game music do you have the strongest reactions to? Interesting. I mean, I find lots of the Mass Effect 2 stuff really catchy. I'd say the game where the music has the most impact on me is probably Skies of Arcadia, which I think possibly has my favourite score in any game ever, as well as just being one of my favourite games of all time, full stop. Just like, when it wants to do the happy music, the music is so flipping happy, it just cheers me up to listen to it. But when it wants to do the action and the drama, it's got great music about that as well. It's got some really great kind of down songs for the sad moments as well. It's just a wonderful game, wonderful score. One day I'll do a proper series of that. One day when I think I can do it justice. Any new interesting analytics from Fallout 3's Better Than You Think video? Nothing since last month that's kind of particularly emerged. It's kind of, just steadily picking up views. It's over 2.5 million at this point, if I recall correctly. And it just seems to be quietly picking up views, mainly from showing up in sidebars, being high ranking if you search Fallout 3 in YouTube, and the occasional share floating around together with just a few of our subscribers, just, I think, possibly rewatching. I think some people have rewatched it. It seems to be steady since last month, and nothing new of huge note there as far as I can tell. What is the best cinema snack in your opinion? Sweet and salty popcorn. I love sweet and salty popcorn. It's the best. Though M&Ms are pretty good too. M&Ms are good. John, did you play Megaton Rainfall before? I did not, but I saw Dan play it, and it does look kind of fun, so I will look at it at some point. What are your personal favourite insults from ancient Greece and Rome? Ooh, I can answer both of these in one go. And this isn't really an insult so much as it is just a really, really lovely, sarcastic little observation, which I've always loved. I can't remember where I first heard this. It must have been... I honestly can't recall. Anyway, so, during the Imperial era of Rome, a lot of triumphal arches were put up. Like, an awful, awful lot of them. So, there's a famous bit of graffiti that was found where someone had basically written on the side of one of these arches, arcus, which is the Latin for arch. Literally, someone just wrote the word arch on the side of an arch. But they wrote it in Greek letters. And in Greek, arcus means enough. And that's just beautiful. That's the sort of humour that I appreciate, damn it. And of course, I think we can reasonably assume that many Latin people would have actually been able to read the Greek alphabet, even if they didn't necessarily speak Greek themselves. So most people would have just read that as arch, but like written by a Greek person. But arcus meaning enough with the arches. It's good. It's always been my favourite little anecdote just for sarky humour from the ancient world. And more importantly, when you're getting back to the Witcher series, expect a Witcher 2 mini-series of some description in the new year. It's not going to fit in before the new year now, not with all the new stuff coming out. John, how come you haven't tried making Jaffa cakes in one of your cooking videos yet? This was actually a suggestion I think that Claire made ahead of the most recent video when I was trying to make the tabby cake. Claire actually suggested, could you try and make the world's biggest Jaffa cake? Just like a massive Jaffa cake. I think that was one of Claire's suggestions. So it has definitely come up, and it might well happen in future. I only didn't do it because it struck me as a little bit on the simple side, and I like the videos to be quite big and stupidly complicated. So it might happen in future, but I'll need to find a bit of a twist to it, I think. And a question about West Virginia. I sincerely hope everyone in my neck of the woods extended you a warm welcome. Did you venture much outside of the Greenbrier? I'm afraid not, just because, as I was saying earlier when I gave you kind of the summary of everything we didn't have a huge amount of time. We did a tiny bit of sightseeing in Washington, insofar as we just nipped into Georgetown to grab a bite to eat. But for the most part, it was just flights, events, parties in the Greenbrier. We just didn't have that much time to get out and about, especially as the actual town of Greenbrier seems very, very small. It seems to mostly be just a dormitory for the staff who are working in the Greenbrier estate. We didn't see much sign of anything aside from just a couple of truck stops and restaurants. There didn't seem to be much else there aside from just housing and some restaurants and a couple of Dollar Generals. So there didn't seem to be a huge amount there. So I don't know where we'd have gone. I don't know what the nearest big town is. So sadly we were just kept a bit busy. So I am sorry. I got to kind of appreciate some of the real natural beauty of West Virginia, and it is a stunningly beautiful state. Whether you're down on the ground or up in the air, those forests and mountains and everything, it's very, very pretty. Absolutely, definitely. But sadly, we didn't have much chance to actually just go around and do anything in the way of excursions. And finally, which of your Crusader Kings 2 characters do you most identify with? I always, just kind of, inevitably, I kind of identified with John the Expansive a little bit. Being kind of I think he was I think he was the first, like, king who we raised up from a kid, if I recall correctly. Because Conan the Faceless, if I recall correctly, he was just kind of brought in just based on some votes or whatever. I can't even remember how exactly he became king. I don't think I selected him, or if I did, it was very much a bit of an arbitrary choice. John was the first king who was, like, in some ways groomed to rule. And I particularly liked him because he just started off so awfully. It was so horrendously bad, all of the stats. He just seemed so terrible. And I like the fact that he had the arc. When now we look back at John the Expansive, who was so instrumental in, you know, helping get the Kingdom of Cornwall set up and everything. So, yeah, I actually, I really quite like John the Expansive. I like him because I just feel like he's got the best arc to him. So I've always had, you know, aside from just the name, I've always had warm feelings for him. And that is the end, ladies and gentlemen. That is the end of the Patroncast. I'm very tired. I might go and have a lie down now. I'm so flipping tired at the minute. This has been the Jetlagged Patroncast. I hope it hasn't showed. I apologise if it has. We will have the Patroncast back, of course, at the end of this next month. The next one should be a little bit more reliable. I think this one's been... it's taken a while. This one has taken a while to actually put together. So I'm sorry if it's a little bit later compared to the submission thread than it normally would be. It's just because all the America stuff and the exhaustion after that point. So I am sorry about that. We will leave things off there, ladies and gentlemen. But in the meantime, I've been John. It's been many a true nerd. And thank you all so very, very much for keeping all of this madness going, because this has been the September 2018 Patroncast. Thank you very much, and goodbye.